The envelope landed on my desk with a soft thud. Inside was everything I needed to take down Patricia Reynolds, my mother-in-law. For 6 months, she had been trying to steal my $40 million inheritance. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 32 years old, and today Patricia was going to learn she had messed with the wrong person. The money came from my father, a self-made tech mogul who built his fortune from nothing. He passed away suddenly 6 months ago, leaving everything to me, his only child. But what Patricia didn't know was that my father left me something more valuable than money. He taught me how to fight. My assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mrs. Bennett, your mother-in-law is here for your meeting." I smoothed my silk blouse and tucked the envelope away. "Send her in, Angela." Patricia walked in like she owned the place, dressed in a Chanel suit, her silver hair perfectly styled. Behind her was my husband, Michael, looking uncomfortable, like always when caught between us. "Claire, dear," Patricia said with a sharp smile. "Let's discuss this like adults." I gestured to the chairs. "Please sit." They did. Patricia sat tall and poised, while Michael fidgeted with his tie. I studied them both, remembering how different things had been just a few months ago. When I first met Michael, Patricia welcomed me into the family with open arms. We met at a charity gala, fell in love, and got married within a year. Patricia had seemed happy, calling me good stock. Then my father died. Everything changed. The moment she heard about my inheritance, her attitude flipped. Suddenly, I wasn't good enough. She called me a gold digger, a social climber, someone who didn't deserve that kind of wealth. "I spoke with your father's lawyer," Patricia said, pulling a document from her designer handbag. "He believes the will is questionable. Your father was under stress. His judgment may have been affected." I kept my face calm. "Is that so?" She nodded. "Yes. In fact, he's willing to testify that your father had second thoughts about leaving everything to you. He wanted the money in a stable family's hands." She handed me the document, a supposed statement from my father's lawyer, Harrison. But I knew it was fake. Just yesterday, the real Harrison had shown me proof that Patricia tried to bribe and threaten him into lying. "Interesting," I said. "And what do you want?" Patricia smiled wider. "A fair deal. The money should go into a family trust, controlled by Michael and me. You'd still get a monthly allowance, of course." I looked at my husband, who was staring at his shoes. "Michael, what do you think?" He looked up, startled. "I just want what's best for everyone." Typical Michael, always avoiding conflict. At first, I had liked how easygoing he was. Now, I saw it for what it was, weakness. Patricia cut back in. "We need to protect this money for the future. You're not responsible enough to handle it, Claire. Your father's company has already lost 5% in stock value since you took over." She had done her research, but she left out the most important detail. The stock drop happened because I exposed a fraud scheme in our Asian division. Cleaning up the mess would only make the company stronger in the long run. "I see," I said, opening my laptop. "And I suppose your new offshore accounts have nothing to do with your concern for the future." Patricia's smile wavered. "I don't know what you mean." I turned the screen toward her. "No. 3 accounts in the Cayman Islands, all opened last month, right after you first tried to challenge the will." Her face went pale. How? How did you get this?" I smirked. "Let's just say I learned from my father. Did you really think I wasn't watching?" Michael finally spoke, his voice shaky. "Mom, what is she talking about?" I almost felt bad for him. Almost. "Your mother has been busy, Michael," I said, laying out more papers. "Bribing officials, faking documents, even hiring investigators to dig up dirt on me, all while pretending to care about the family." Patricia's calm mask cracked. You've been spying on me?" "No, Patricia," I replied coldly. "I've been protecting my father's legacy from someone who thought she could steal it with lies and fraud." I pressed the intercom button. "Angela, send in our guests." The door opened. Harrison walked in, followed by 2 men in dark suits, FBI agents who handle financial crimes. Patricia's face turned pale. "What is this?" "This," I said, "is what happens when you try to steal from the wrong person." The next few hours were a blur. The FBI questioned Patricia while I watched from my office, seeing her carefully built image fall apart. Michael paced outside, trying to call his mother's lawyer, glancing at me with hurt in his eyes. I ignored him and focused on the security camera feed. Patricia was doing what she did best, lying. acting like a concerned mother-in-law who only wanted to help the family. But I could see the cracks in her performance. My phone buzzed. A text from Harrison. She's blaming me. Says I told her to challenge the will. I smirked and typed back. Good thing we recorded everything. Patricia didn't know that Harrison had been working with me all along. The moment she tried to bribe him, he came straight to me. Together, we gathered proof. Every threat. Every illegal deal. Angela's voice came through the intercom. Mrs. Bennett, your husband wants to speak with you. I sighed. Send him in. Michael entered, looking exhausted, like he had aged 10 years in a few hours. Claire, tell me this is a mistake, he pleaded. Sit down, Michael, I said, pointing to the chair across from me. We need to talk. He sank into it, running a hand through his hair. I don't understand. Why would my mother do this? Money makes people do terrible things, I said. But this isn't just about money. Your mother never thought I was good enough for you. The inheritance was just her excuse to act on it. But why didn't you tell me? His voice shook. I'm your husband. I looked at him carefully. Would you have believed me over your mother? Be honest. His silence told me everything. Besides, I added, you weren't exactly innocent. Those meetings with Harrison, did you think I wouldn't find out? He turned pale. That was different. Mom said we had to protect the family's money by helping her steal what was mine. I cut him off by standing by while she tried to destroy everything my father built. You didn't mean to hurt me. I let out a short laugh. It's funny how everyone says that. Your mother didn't mean to hurt me. She just wanted to steal my inheritance. You didn't mean to hurt me. You just helped her do it. Michael leaned forward, desperate. Claire, please, we can fix this. I'll talk to Mom, make her understand. There's nothing to fix, I said firmly. The FBI has all the proof they need. Your mother will be charged with fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. And you, I paused, letting the words sink in. You have a choice to make. His head snapped up. What do you mean? I kept my voice calm. I have proof of your involvement. Not as much as I have on Patricia, but enough to cause trouble for you. Whether I hand that over depends on what you do next. He looked at me in shock. Are you blackmailing me? I'm giving you a chance, I corrected. Walk away now. Sign the divorce papers my lawyer will send. Don't make any claims on my assets or my father's company, and I'll leave your name out of this. Divorce? He whispered. Claire, I love you. I laughed, but there was no warmth in it. No, Michael. You love the idea of me, the perfect wife who would go along with your mother's plans, who would hand over her inheritance to keep the peace. That person never existed. Before he could respond, Angela's voice came through the intercom. Mrs. Bennett, the FBI agents want to speak with you. Send them in, I said, holding Michael's gaze. Think about what I said. You have until tomorrow to decide. The agents walked in as Michael left, looking stunned. Agent Tess, the lead investigator, shook his head. Your mother-in-law is something else, he said. She's still claiming this is just a family misunderstanding. Did she explain the offshore accounts? I asked. She says they were business investments, Agent Wilson, his partner, replied. But we traced them to some interesting sources. Turns out Patricia's been involved in more than just this scam. I wasn't surprised. People like her never stop at just one scheme. You'll find everything you need in those accounts, I said. She's been secretly taking money from her own family's trust for years. Tess raised an eyebrow. How did you figure that out? My father taught me to be thorough, I said simply. Once I knew she was after me, I had her investigated. Everything is in the file I gave you. The agents left with boxes of evidence, and Patricia was led out in handcuffs. She held her head high, until she saw me watching through the office window. Then, for the first time, the mask slipped. The rage in her eyes told me everything. She had lost. You'll regret this, Patricia shouted as they led her away. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I gave her a cold smile. No, Patricia, you had no idea who you were dealing with. The fallout was huge. Within days, the story was all over the financial news. Patricia Reynolds, wealthy socialite, arrested for fraud and conspiracy. Mother-in-law from hell, inside the $40 million inheritance scheme. The headlines were brutal. Michael made his decision the next morning. He signed the divorce papers without a fight, looking tired and defeated. His carefully built life was falling apart. "I'm sorry," he said softly, sliding the papers across my desk. I should have stood up to her. "Yes," I said. "You should have." At the door, he hesitated. "What's going to happen to her?" "That depends on how many other victims come forward," I replied. "The FBI is uncovering decades of fraud. Your mother has been stealing from a lot of people, not just me." Patricia's plan to take my inheritance had backfired. It exposed years of financial crimes, stealing from business partners, distant relatives, even charities. A week after her arrest, I got an unexpected visitor. Catherine Reynolds, Michael's grandmother and the real head of the Reynolds family, asked to meet. She sat across from me, elegant in a perfectly tailored suit and pearl necklace. But unlike Patricia's fake charm, Catherine had a quiet strength. "Well," she said, her sharp blue eyes studying me, "you've certainly shaken things up." "Your daughter-in-law tried to steal from me," I replied. I kept my voice calm. I responded accordingly. Catherine's lips twitched. "Yes, you did. Quite impressively, I must say." She reached into her handbag and pulled out a folder, placing it on my desk. Inside were decades-old documents, proof of Patricia's schemes, carefully recorded. "You knew," I said, realization hitting me. "You've known all along." Catherine nodded. Patricia was reckless. She thought marrying my son made her untouchable. "I've been collecting evidence for years, waiting for the right person to bring her down." "And why didn't you stop her yourself?" "Because the Reynolds family name had to be protected," she said simply. "But you're not a Reynolds. You could do what needed to be done without worrying about family reputation." I leaned back, understanding. "So you wanted her exposed." "I wanted her stopped," Catherine corrected. "The exposure was just a consequence. Better it come from an outsider than from within." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "Our family lawyers will support the case against Patricia. And Claire," she paused at the door, meeting my gaze. "You would have made a fine Reynolds under different circumstances." Coming from her, it was high praise. The case against Patricia moved quickly. With my evidence and the Reynolds family's support, the prosecution built an airtight case. She pleaded guilty to multiple counts of fraud and faced years in prison. On the day of her sentencing, I watched as the judge handed down her fate, 10 years in federal prison, plus repayment to all her victims. Patricia, once so composed, now stood in a prison jumpsuit, her arrogance finally gone. She turned to me as they led her away. "I underestimated you," she admitted quietly. "Yes," I replied. "You did." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, shouting questions about justice and revenge. But for me, it had never been about revenge. It was about protecting what was mine, honoring my father's legacy. A year later, I stood at the podium at my father's company's annual shareholder meeting. Our stock had doubled since I took over, and our expansion was exceeding expectations. "Success isn't just about innovation," I told the packed room. "It's about integrity, protecting what matters, no matter who tries to take it from you." That evening, a letter arrived from prison. Patricia's handwriting was shaky, her words pleading. She begged for my help, swearing she had changed. She even offered to reveal hidden assets in exchange for my support at her parole hearing. I tore up the letter without a second thought. On my desk, I kept a photo of my father. He was smiling, strong and proud, the same way I now saw myself every morning. He had taught me more than just how to run a business. He had taught me to stand my ground, to never let anyone take what was mine. Patricia thought I was just an easy target, a spoiled heiress she could control. Instead, she ran into someone who had learned from the best. Someone who knew that in both business and life, you have to fight for what's yours. Michael still called sometimes, usually after a few drinks, talking about what we had lost. But we hadn't lost anything. We had only uncovered the truth, his weakness, his mother's greed, and my strength. Sometimes clarity comes with a cost. As for me, I was just getting started. My father's company was thriving, growing beyond even his biggest dreams. I wasn't just his daughter anymore. I was his legacy, proof that what he built would last. And if anyone else tried to take that from me, they'd learn the same lesson Patricia did. Some people shouldn't be underestimated.
The irony of being a cultural anthropologist is that I spend my life uncovering other people's secrets while desperately hiding my own. Standing in the bustling hotel ballroom, watching the wedding preparations unfold, I felt that familiar ache in my chest, the one that's been there for 24 years since the day I gave up my baby boy. My name is Prudence, and today my daughter Aurora is getting married. I should be focused solely on her happiness, but my hands are trembling as I adjust the flower arrangements, trying to keep myself busy. Mom, stop fussing with everything. Aurora laughs, swatting my hands away from the centerpiece I've rearranged 3 times. The flowers are perfect. You're more nervous than I am. If she only knew. Sorry, sweetheart, just want everything to be perfect for you and Hector. His name catches in my throat, like it has since the day Aurora first introduced us 6 months ago. Speaking of Hector, my sister Quinn's voice cuts through the air like a knife. Have you seen him yet today, Prudence? He's such a wonderful young man. So, well-bred. I catch the slight emphasis she puts on those last words, the familiar judgment in her tone. Quinn has always been expert at wielding words like weapons. He's getting ready with the groomsmen, Aurora says, oblivious to the tension. Dad's helping them with their boutonnieres. My father Franklin appears in the doorway, his once commanding presence now diminished by age, but no less intimidating to me. The men are all set, he announces, then fixes me with a look that still makes me feel 16. Prudence, a word. I follow him into the hallway where he straightens his tie unnecessarily. I trust you're keeping yourself together today? Of course, Father. Why wouldn't I be? Don't play coy. This wedding, it must bring up certain memories. Before I can respond, Hector himself rounds the corner, adjusting his cufflinks. My heart stops. In that moment, as he raises his hand to wave, I see it. The distinctive crescent-shaped birthmark on his right palm, identical to the one I memorized in the few precious hours I held my son before they took him away. Hi, Prudence, Hector calls out cheerfully. Everything looking good in there? I force myself to breathe, to smile. Perfect. You look very handsome. Thanks, though I'm nervous as hell. He laughs, running that marked hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it makes my chest ache. Never thought I'd be lucky enough to marry someone like Aurora. My father clears his throat. Perhaps you should check on the bride, Prudence. Actually, I say, seizing the moment, Hector, I've been meaning to ask, that birthmark on your hand, it's quite unique. His face lights up. Oh yeah, my mom, my adoptive mom, I mean, always said it was my lucky charm. Born with it. I see my father stiffen beside me. Quinn appears as if summoned, her heels clicking rapidly across the marble floor. Hector, dear, the photographer wants some pre-ceremony shots with the groomsmen. Right, of course. He gives me another warm smile. My smile, I realize with a jolt. And heads off. Quinn grabs my arm, her fingers digging in. What do you think you're doing? I pull away. Interesting that you never mentioned Hector was adopted when Aurora first introduced him. Why would I? It's not exactly dinner conversation, is it? No, I say quietly. But it might have been relevant information for me. Our father steps between us. This is neither the time nor place. When is the time, Father? When was it ever the time to discuss what you and Quinn did? Prudence, he warns, but I'm already walking away, my mind racing. Back in the bridal suite, Aurora is twirling in her dress while her cousin Tiffany takes photos on her phone. Mom, what do you think? She asks, beaming. I look at my beautiful daughter about to marry her own brother and feel the weight of 2 decades of secrets threatening to crush us all. You look perfect, sweetheart, I manage to say. Tiffany, ever observant, tilts her head. Are you okay, Aunt Prudence? You look like you've seen a ghost. In a way, I have. The ghost of a baby boy with a crescent moon on his palm, coming back to haunt us all. As I watch Aurora adjust her veil, I realize I have less than an hour to decide whether to speak up or let this wedding proceed. Either choice promising to shatter our family forever. My phone buzzes with a text from Quinn. Don't you dare ruin this day. Remember what's at stake. I delete the message and look up to see Hector's adoptive mother Susan entering the room, carrying a box of old family photos she wants to display at the reception. As she sets it down, a single photograph slips out, a baby's hand with a familiar crescent-shaped mark. My heart stops. The truth isn't just knocking anymore, it's breaking down the door. I couldn't take my eyes off that fallen photograph. Before Susan could notice, I snatched it up, my hands shaking as I stared at the image that confirmed my worst fears. "Oh, that's one of Hector's baby pictures," Susan said, reaching for it. "He was such a beautiful child." "He was 6 months old here?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "Yes. How did you know?" "Because I had an identical photo hidden in my desk at home, taken the day before I signed the adoption papers." Before I could respond, Quinn appeared in the doorway. "Susan, could you help with the guest book setup?" And Prudence a moment. Quinn practically dragged me into an empty conference room, closing the door with unnecessary force. "Stop this right now." "Stop what? Recognizing my own son? Lower your voice." She glanced nervously at the door. "You gave up any right to call him that 24 years ago." The memories flooded back, being 16, pregnant, terrified. Quinn, 20 at the time, standing beside our father as he laid out my options. "You mean when you and father forced me to give him up? We gave you a chance at a real life. Look at you now, successful, respected. Would that have happened if you'd been a teenage mother? You don't know that. You never gave me the choice." "Choice?" Quinn laughed bitterly. "You were a child yourself. Father made the right decision. The right decision. To arrange my son's adoption through your husband's law firm, to never tell me where he went, and now, by some cosmic joke, he's marrying his own sister." Quinn's face went pale. "You can't prove anything." "That birthmark is proof enough. And that photo. Photos can be coincidental." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "Think about what you're considering. You'll destroy everything. Aurora's happiness. Hector's life, this whole family." "This family?" I spat the words. "The one that shipped me off to Aunt Martha until the baby was born? The one that told everyone I was at a special academic program? We protected you. You protected yourselves, your reputations, your precious social standing." A knock at the door made us both jump. Tiffany poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, but Aurora's asking for both of you. It's almost time." Quinn composed herself instantly, smoothing her dress. "Of course, dear. We'll be right there." As Tiffany left, Quinn grabbed my arm. "Listen to me carefully. You have exactly 1 hour to decide if you want to blow up everyone's lives. Think about Aurora. Think about what this would do to her." I pulled away from her grip. "I am thinking about Aurora and Hector and the truth they both deserve to know." Back in the bridal suite, Aurora was putting on her grandmother's pearl necklace, a family heirloom that should have gone to me, but Quinn had somehow ended up with it. "Mum, can you help me with the clasp?" As I fastened the pearls, I caught our reflection in the mirror. Mother and daughter, secrets and lies stretched between us like invisible threads. Aurora's eyes met mine in the glass. "You seem sad," she said softly. "Just emotional. It's a big day." "Tell me about it." She turned to face me. "You know what's funny? Sometimes I look at Hector and see something so familiar, like I've known him my whole life. Isn't that crazy?" My heart clenched. "Not crazy at all." Bentley, Quinn's husband, appeared in the doorway. 5 minutes until we start. Everyone ready?" I watched him exchange a loaded glance with Quinn. He knew. Of course he knew. His law firm had handled the adoption. How many of them had been in on this conspiracy of silence? "Actually," I said, "I need to check something in my car. I'll be right back." I hurried to the parking lot, yanked open my car door and grabbed my laptop bag. Inside was a worn manila envelope I'd carried to every major event in my life for the past 24 years, waiting for the right moment, or maybe the wrong one, to open it. Inside were my copies of the adoption papers, a handful of photos, and a letter I'd written to my son but never sent. The final item was a DNA test I'd taken 6 months ago after first meeting Hector. I hadn't opened the results yet, too afraid of what they might confirm. "What are you doing?" I turned to find my father standing there, leaning on his cane. The years hadn't been kind to him, but his eyes were still sharp as ever. "Getting proof," I said, holding up the envelope. "Proof will only hurt them both." He stepped closer. "You want revenge, Prudence? Fine. Take it out on me, but leave those kids alone." "This isn't about revenge. It's about truth." "Truth?" He shook his head. "Truth is what we make it. Right now, the truth is that two young people are in love and about to start their lives together. They're siblings, Father. That's the truth. They're strangers who fell in love, unless you destroy that with your selfish need for closure." The wedding march began to play faintly from inside the hotel. Time was up. I had to decide, right now, whether to let my children commit an innocent but horrible mistake or tear their world apart with the truth. I clutched the envelope tighter and headed back inside. The envelope felt like it was burning through my clutch bag as I made my way back to the bridal suite. Aurora was already lined up with her bridesmaids, but I caught Susan alone in the hallway, straightening Hector's boutonniere in a way that made my heart ache. "Susan," I said, keeping my voice low, "could we talk for a moment? About Hector's adoption?" Her hands froze on the flowers. "What about it?" "The agency that handled it. Was it Riverside Family Services?" "How did you—" She stepped back, studying my face. "Why are you asking these questions today of all days?" Before I could respond, Tiffany appeared beside us, her junior detective instincts clearly triggered by our hushed conversation. "Aunt Prudence, I've been meaning to tell you something interesting. I've been doing some research for my criminology class, practicing with adoption records." Quinn materialized as if summoned by the word adoption, cutting Tiffany off mid-sentence. "Shouldn't you be in line with the other bridesmaids, dear? But I found something." "Now, Tiffany." I watched my niece reluctantly join the lineup, making a mental note to find her later. Susan was still looking at me strangely, but Bentley appeared and whisked her away to her seat, shooting me a warning glance over his shoulder. The wedding coordinator began arranging everyone for the processional. I should have been focusing on Aurora, but my eyes kept drifting to Hector at the altar. The way he stood, the slight tilt of his head, they were mirror images of my father in his younger days. "Last chance, Prudence." Quinn's whisper carried more threat than concern. "Once that ceremony starts." "You knew," I hissed back. "You knew he was back in our lives the moment Aurora brought him home." "I did what was necessary. Always have." "Necessary? Like when you convinced Father that a teenage mother would ruin the family name. You were 16. What kind of life could you have given him? Better than letting him accidentally marry his sister." A sharp intake of breath made us both turn. Tiffany stood frozen behind us, her eyes wide. "What did you just say?" "Nothing," Quinn snapped. "Get in line." But Tiffany stood her ground. "That's what my research was showing. Hector's adoption, the papers were processed through Uncle Bentley's firm, and the dates. They matched when you disappeared to Aunt Martha's, Aunt Prudence." Quinn grabbed Tiffany's arm. "You will not breathe a word of this, do you understand?" "Let her go." I stepped forward, my voice stronger than I felt. "She's right. And I have proof." I opened my clutch and pulled out the DNA test results, still sealed. Quinn's face went white. "You wouldn't dare. Try me." The wedding march started playing, and Aurora appeared at the end of the hall with our father. She looked radiant, innocent, completely unaware of the bomb about to detonate her life. "Please," Susan whispered, and I realized she'd heard everything. "If what you're saying is true, wait until after the ceremony. Let me talk to him first." I looked at my son's adoptive mother, saw the fear and love in her eyes. "You didn't know either, did you?" She shook her head. "The agency, they said the birth mother wanted no contact, that she was at peace with her decision." "Another lie," I said, glaring at Quinn. "Add it to the list." The processional began moving. Tiffany, torn between family loyalty and her budding investigative instincts, reluctantly took her place in line. Quinn gripped my arm one last time. "Think about Aurora. Think about what this will do to her." I am thinking about Aurora and Hector and 24 years of lies. As the bridesmaids started their walk down the aisle, I saw Bentley whispering urgently to my father. The old man's face was ashen as he held Aurora's arm, leading her toward an impossible future. I clutched the envelope tighter, feeling the weight of 2 decades of silence pressing down on me. The DNA results could confirm what that birthmark and those photos already told me, but did I need them? Looking at Hector's face, my father's face, I knew the truth in my bones. The coordinator gestured for me to take my place in line. In moments, my children would stand before God and family, about to make a terrible mistake. Unless I stopped it. Last chance, Quinn whispered again, but this time I heard the fear in her voice. She knew me well enough to recognize my resolve. I stepped into line, my heart pounding. Ahead of me, Aurora and our father paused at the entrance to the ceremony space. The guests rose, music swelled, and Hector beamed at his bride, his sister, with pure love and joy. I had less than 50 steps to decide. Let the ceremony begin and keep our secrets buried, or speak up and detonate every relationship in this room. I took my first step down the aisle, the truth burning in my throat. Each step down the aisle felt like walking through quicksand. Aurora floated ahead of me, her white dress catching the light from the stained glass windows. Hector's smile grew wider as she approached, and I saw tears forming in his eyes. Eyes that matched mine exactly. The minister began his welcome, his voice echoing through the chapel. Dearly beloved. Tiffany caught my eye from her place among the bridesmaids, subtly holding up her phone. A text message glowed on the screen. I have the adoption records. DNA test might not be needed. Quinn noticed the exchange and shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Behind her, Bentley was typing furiously on his phone, probably trying to contain the situation through legal channels. My father sat rigid, his knuckles white around his cane. If anyone knows any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, the traditional words hung in the air. Quinn's head snapped toward me, her eyes pleading. Susan dabbed at tears, happy tears that would soon turn to something else. The envelope in my clutch felt like it was made of lead. Speak now or forever hold your peace. My throat closed up. The silence stretched, becoming uncomfortable. Aurora and Hector turned slightly, wondering about the delay. I saw my daughter's face, radiant with joy, and my son's expression, full of love and hope. The minister cleared his throat, about to continue, when Tiffany suddenly stood up. I have something to say. Tiffany, sit down, Quinn hissed. No. My niece's voice was shaking but determined. I'm sorry, but there's something everyone needs to know. I've been researching adoption records for my criminology project, and I found... This is neither the time nor place, Bentley interrupted, standing up. Then when is? I heard myself say, rising from my seat. When would be a good time to tell them? Aurora turned fully now, her veil swishing. Tell us what? Mum, what's going on? Hector's hand, the one with the birthmark, reached for hers. The gesture broke something in me. That birthmark, I said, my voice carrying in the sudden silence. You got it from me. What? Hector's confusion was genuine, painful to witness. Prudence, don't, my father warned, struggling to his feet, but the truth was already spilling out. Unstoppable now. 24 years ago, I had a baby boy. My family forced me to give him up for adoption. They arranged everything through Bentley's law firm, kept all the records buried. Mom, Aurora's voice cracked. What are you saying? She's saying nothing, Quinn interjected. She's just upset about the wedding. I'm saying, I continued, pulling out the envelope, that I recognized that birthmark the moment I met Hector. I knew in my heart, but I got a DNA test to be sure. And Tiffany found the adoption records that prove it. The chapel erupted in gasps and murmurs. Susan stood up, swaying slightly. But the agency said they told us the birth mother wanted no contact. Another lie. I turned to my children, both of them now. I never wanted to give you up, Hector, and I never wanted to hurt either of you like this, but I couldn't let you. Let us what? Hector's voice was barely a whisper. Aurora's face had gone completely white. She looked at her bouquet, then at Hector's hand still holding hers. Understanding dawned in her eyes, and she dropped the flowers, stumbling backward. We're siblings, Tiffany finished quietly, holding up her phone. The adoption records confirm it. I'm so sorry. Hector released Aurora's hand like it had burned him. This can't be real. This can't be happening. It's happening because of her, Quinn pointed at me accusingly. She could have kept quiet, let you both be happy, but she had to make it about herself. Let them be happy, I shot back. By letting them commit— Stop! Aurora's scream cut through the chaos. Everyone just stop! She turned to our father, tears streaming down her face. Grandpa, is this true? Did you make Mum give up her baby? Did you know who Hector was when I brought him home? The old man seemed to age another decade before our eyes. I did what I thought was best. Best for who? Hector demanded, his voice shaking. For me, for Aurora, or for your precious family reputation? Susan was openly crying now. All these years. We lived in the same city. They could have grown up knowing each other as siblings, but instead— Aurora looked at her wedding dress, then at Hector, horror growing in her expression. Oh God, we almost— She turned and ran down the aisle, her white dress billowing behind her. Hector stood frozen at the altar, looking lost and betrayed. The guests were whispering. Phones were coming out to record the drama. Aurora, wait! I called after her, but Tiffany was already following her out. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw 24 years of lost moments reflected in his tears. I'm so sorry, I whispered. I should have told you sooner. The truth was out now, but as I watched my daughter flee and my son crumble, I wondered if Quinn had been right about one thing. Some truths might be too devastating to bear. The chapel dissolved into chaos. Guests were standing, phones recording, voices rising in shock and confusion. Susan rushed to Hector's side, but he backed away from her reaching hands. Did you know? He demanded. Any of it? No, sweetheart, I swear. Susan's voice broke. The adoption agency. They told us it was closed, permanent. We never knew. Liar! Quinn's voice cut through the commotion. Everyone's lying. Prudence, show them the DNA test. Open it right now. My hands trembled as I pulled out the envelope. I don't need to open it. Look at him. Look at his face, his gestures. He's my son. Prove it, Bentley challenged, stepping forward. Because right now you've just destroyed 2 lives based on a birthmark and your imagination. Hector's eyes fixed on the envelope. Open it. The chapel fell silent as I tore the seal. The paper shook in my hands as I unfolded it, but before I could read it, Tiffany burst back through the doors. Aurora's locked herself in the bridal suite, she announced, breathless. She's not answering anyone. I'll go, I said, but Quinn blocked my path. Haven't you done enough? You've ruined everything. Their wedding, their relationship, their lives. Better than letting them get married, I shot back. How long were you going to keep this secret? Through their marriage? Their children? The word children made Hector visibly flinch. He grabbed the DNA results from my hands and scanned them quickly, his face draining of colour. It's true, he whispered. 99.9% probability of parent-child relationship. He turned to Susan. Mom, I need air. I can't. He stumbled down the aisle and out the door. Susan started after him, but my father's voice stopped everyone. Let him go. The old man looked ancient now, defeated. Let them both process this. Process this? I rounded on him. Like I got to process being sent away. Like I got to process having my baby taken from me. You were 16. I was a mother. His mother. I pointed at the door Hector had just fled through. You had no right. I had every right, he roared, suddenly finding his old authority. I was protecting this family. You were protecting yourself, Tiffany interrupted. Everyone turned to stare at her. She held up her phone. I found the original paperwork. The adoption wasn't just about Aunt Prudence being young. There was a scandal brewing about to hit the newspapers. Something about misappropriated church funds. The timing of the adoption, it was a trade-off, wasn't it? The church agreed to bury the financial story if the situation with Prudence was handled quietly. The colour drained from my father's face. Quinn gasped. "Father, is that true?" He didn't answer, but his silence said everything. "Oh my God," I breathed. "It wasn't even about me being too young. It was about money. Your money." The guests were riveted now, watching our family implode in real time. Someone was definitely streaming this live. "Get out," I told the onlookers. "All of you. This wedding is obviously cancelled." As the murmuring crowd filed out, Susan approached me slowly. "I need you to understand something. Whatever the circumstances, Hector was loved, is loved. We may not share blood, but he is my son too." "I know," I said softly. "I saw that in how you raised him. I'm not trying to take him from you." "Then what are you trying to do?" Bentley demanded. "I'm trying to stop my children from making a terrible mistake. I'm trying to finally tell the truth." "The truth?" Quinn laughed bitterly. "The truth is you couldn't leave well enough alone. You had to play the victim, the wronged mother. Consequences be damned." "Consequences like letting siblings marry each other?" "Stop saying that." Everyone turned. Aurora stood in the doorway, her makeup streaked with tears, her wedding dress crumpled. "Stop talking about us like we're not real people, like we're just some tragedy in your family drama." She walked down the aisle, stopping in front of me. You knew. You knew for months, didn't you? You let us plan this whole wedding. Let us fall deeper in love. Why didn't you tell us sooner?" I was afraid of losing you both." "Well, congratulations." Her voice was ice. "Now you might have managed exactly that." She turned to Quinn and our father. "And you've been lying to everyone for decades, playing with people's lives like they're chess pieces." "Aurora, sweetheart," Quinn started. Just don't." She pulled off her veil and let it fall to the floor. "I need to find Hector, not like before, but because right now he's the only other person who understands exactly how this feels." She walked out, leaving us all standing in the wreckage of secrets finally exposed. Through the stained glass windows, I could see guests still lingering in the parking lot, hungry for more drama. But the real drama was just beginning. 24 years of lies were unraveling, and none of us would emerge unscathed. I found them in the hotel's garden, sitting on opposite ends of a stone bench. They weren't speaking, just staring ahead, their matching profiles a punch to my gut. Tiffany stood nearby, acting as both guard and mediator. "They won't let anyone else near them," she whispered as I approached. "Not even Susan." Aurora spotted me first. "Did you come to apologize again, or maybe drop another bomb?" "I came to listen," I said, staying a few feet away. "If you'll let me." Hector turned, and the pain in his eyes made me flinch. "Listen to what?" "How we feel about discovering we're siblings on our wedding day. How we've been living a lie." "You're not the only ones who've been living a lie." Quinn's voice came from behind me. She walked into the garden, followed by our father, who looked like he'd aged a decade in the past hour. "Oh, this should be good," Aurora said bitterly. "More family secrets?" Quinn wrung her hands. "What happened back then? It wasn't just about Father's scandal or Prudence's age. I was pregnant too." The silence that followed was deafening. "What?" I whispered. "I lost the baby at 3 months. Nobody knew except Father and Bentley." "When you got pregnant, Prudence," Quinn's voice cracked, "I was so angry, so jealous. It seemed unfair that you, the irresponsible one, could have what I'd lost. So you punished me? Punished my son? I convinced Father that adoption was the only option. Used his scandal as leverage." She looked at Hector. "I made sure you went to a good family, but I wanted you far away from us. From my pain." Our father stepped forward, leaning heavily on his cane. "I let my shame and Quinn's grief cloud my judgment. The money, the scandal, they were excuses. The truth is, I failed all of you. Failed us? Hector stood up. You destroyed us. Do you have any idea what this feels like? To discover the person you love most in the world is your sister. Aurora made a small broken sound. We talked about having children. Stop, I pleaded. You couldn't have known. But you knew. Aurora shot to her feet. You knew for months. Every dress fitting, every planning session. You sat there and watched us fall deeper into this nightmare. I tried to find the right moment. The right moment? Hector's laugh was hollow. Maybe before I proposed? Before we fell in love? Before we... He cut himself off, looking sick. Tiffany stepped forward. There's something else you should know. She held up her phone. The adoption records show more than just the connection. They show a pattern of similar arrangements through Uncle Bentley's firm. Other families, other secrets. Quinn went pale. Bentley said those records were sealed. They were. I'm just very good at what I do. Tiffany looked at me. This wasn't just about your baby, Aunt Prudence. It was a whole operation. Rich families making problems disappear. My father sank onto the bench. Bentley assured me it was all legal. Legal doesn't mean right, I said. Where is Bentley now? Gone, Quinn whispered. He left as soon as Tiffany mentioned the records, probably destroying evidence as we speak. Aurora stood up suddenly. I can't process all this right now. My wedding day has turned into some kind of twisted crime documentary. Aurora, Hector reached for her automatically, then pulled back. They both flinched at the instinctive gesture. Don't, she said softly. I need space. From all of you. She turned to leave, but stopped short. Susan stood in the garden entrance, holding a small wooden box. Before you go, she said, there's something you both should have. She opened the box, revealing a stack of letters. These came to our house over the years. No return address, but now I know. She looked at me. They're from your mother. Your real mother. You wrote to me? Hector's voice cracked. Every year on your birthday, I whispered. I never knew if they were delivered. I kept them all, Susan said. I always felt you should have them someday. Aurora stared at the letters. Did you write to me too? Every day in my heart, I said. But you were with me. These letters, they were my only connection to your brother. Hector took the box with trembling hands. I can't. I need time. We all do, Aurora said. She looked at Hector, really looked at him, for the first time since the revelation. We need to figure out who we are to each other now. Your family, Quinn said quietly. However twisted the path, however much we all messed up, that's the truth. Truth? Aurora's laugh was bitter. The truth is that everyone in this family is really good at keeping secrets, but really bad at being honest. She walked away, her wedding dress trailing in the grass. Hector clutched the box of letters and followed, keeping his distance but clearly needing to be near the only other person who understood his pain. I watched my children leave together, yet further apart than they'd ever been. The sun was setting behind the hotel, casting long shadows across the garden where a wedding should have happened. Instead, we stood in the wreckage of decades of secrets, wondering if anything would ever be right again. The hotel bar was nearly empty when Tiffany found me there an hour later. She slid onto the stool next to mine, placing her phone on the counter. Aurora's checked into a room upstairs, she said. Hector's in his car in the parking lot reading your letters. I stared at my untouched wine. And Susan? Talking to the wedding planner about refunds. She paused. The police are here. That got my attention. What? Not for you. For Uncle Bentley. Turns out those adoption records I found. There were irregularities, money changing hands that shouldn't have, missing paperwork. And get this, some of the birth certificates were falsified. Prudence. Quinn's voice made us both turn. She looked exhausted, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. The police want to talk to all of us. Apparently my husband's been running quite the operation through his firm. Did you know? I asked. About the illegal adoptions? No. About the money? She sank onto a bar stool. I knew we were comfortable. I never asked questions. Like you never asked questions about what happened to my baby. I deserved that. She ordered a drink. But you're not innocent either, Prudence. You knew for months about Aurora and Hector. Stop fighting, Tiffany interrupted. The police need statements about the adoption process. They're talking to Hector now. As if summoned by his name, my son appeared in the doorway. His eyes were red and he held one of my letters in his hand. You wrote that you used to sing "You Are My Sunshine" to me in the hospital, he said, his voice rough. Susan, my mom, she always sang that too. Said it felt right somehow. Hector, Susan appeared behind him. The police need to speak with me about the adoption paperwork. I'll come with you, he said, but stopped short. I mean, if you want me to. I'll always want you with me. Susan's voice broke. You're my son, no matter what these records show. They left together, leaving me with Quinn and Tiffany. The bartender tactfully moved to the other end of the bar. Aurora's asking for you, Tiffany said softly. Both of you. We found Aurora in her hotel room, still in her wedding dress, surrounded by crumpled tissues. She looked up as we entered. I've been thinking, she said, about what happens next, about what we tell people. The truth is already out there, Quinn said. Those guests had phones. The truth? Aurora laughed sharply. Which truth? That my mother gave up her baby? That my aunt and grandfather conspired to hide it? That I almost married my brother? Aurora, I started, but she held up her hand. No, let me finish. I've been reading the messages coming in. Everyone's got an opinion. Everyone's choosing sides. But you know what nobody's talking about? How Hector and I feel. Quinn sat on the edge of the bed. Tell us. We're victims here. All of us. You, she pointed at Quinn, lost a baby and let it poison you. You. She turned to me. Lost your son and let fear keep you silent. And now Hector and I, we've lost each other. But not really, because we never really had each other. Not the way we thought. A knock at the door revealed Hector and Susan, followed by my father, leaning heavily on his cane. The police are done with us for now, Susan said, but they'll need to speak with everyone involved in the adoption. Including Bentley? Quinn asked quietly. If they find him, Hector said. He's gone, left everything behind. My father sank into a chair. I never thought. The money he paid for my silence about the church funds, it came from these illegal adoptions. It wasn't just about the money, Tiffany added, checking her phone. The records show a pattern. Rich families, scandals buried, babies relocated. It was about power and control. And now? Aurora stood, her wedding dress rustling. What happens now? Now we tell the truth, I said. All of it. No more secrets. The whole truth. Quinn looked terrified. About everything? Everything. I turned to my children, both of them. You deserve that much. Everyone deserves that much. Hector moved to stand beside Aurora, close but not touching. We need to figure out how to be siblings, how to love each other differently. Aurora nodded, tears falling. And we need our parents, all of our parents, even the ones who messed up. Susan stepped forward. We can figure this out, together. My father cleared his throat. The police. They'll want to know about my role in all this, about the church funds, about pressuring Prudence. Then you'll tell them, Quinn said firmly. We all will. No more hiding. Tiffany's phone buzzed. The media's outside. They want statements. We all looked at each other. This broken, complicated family brought together by lies, but maybe, just maybe, saved by truth. Together, Aurora said, reaching for Hector's hand, then mine. We face this together. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something like hope. The media circus outside the hotel had grown into a full 3-ring spectacle. Camera lights flashed through the lobby windows as our family huddled near the entrance. Ready? I asked, looking at Aurora and Hector. No, Aurora smiled weakly. But when has that stopped us today? We stepped out together into the wall of cameras and microphones. The questions came fast and furious. Is it true about the illegal adoption ring? Did you know they were siblings? What about the church scandal? Aurora raised her hand, still in her wedding dress, and the crowd quieted. Today was supposed to be my wedding day, she began, her voice steady. Instead, it became the day our family's secrets finally came to light. Yes, Hector and I discovered we're siblings. Yes, there was an illegal adoption network. And yes, our family made terrible mistakes. Hector stepped forward. But we're not here to sensationalize our pain. We're here because the truth matters. Because other families deserve to know if their adoptions were part of this network. Bentley's firm handled dozens of adoptions, Tiffany added, holding up her phone. We're working with the authorities to identify other affected families. A reporter pushed forward. Quinn, what do you say to allegations that your husband orchestrated this entire operation? Quinn straightened her spine. I say that my husband will have to answer for his crimes, as will anyone else involved, including me. And what about the church funds? Another shouted at my father. He gripped his cane tighter. I made mistakes, used my position to hide uncomfortable truths. That ends today. Susan moved to stand beside Hector. What matters now is healing. These children, all of them, deserve better than the secrets we built around them. And what happens next? Someone called out. I looked at my children, really looked at them. Aurora, strong and poised even in her pain. Hector, holding himself together while his world fell apart. Both of them victims of choices made before they were born. What happens next, I said, is we rebuild. Not the lies and secrets, but something true, something real. Starting with this, Aurora added, reaching for her brother's hand. Learning to love each other in a new way, the right way. Hector squeezed her hand. We're not victims of our parents' choices anymore. We're survivors who get to choose what happens next. The cameras flashed faster, but something had shifted. The hunger for scandal was being replaced by something else. Recognition of a family choosing truth over comfort, healing over hiding. One last question, a reporter called. What would you say to other families who might be affected by this adoption network? Come forward, Tiffany answered. The police have set up a hotline. Don't let fear keep you silent. And to those who kept these secrets, another pressed. Quinn stepped forward. I'd say it's time to stop protecting reputations and start protecting people. The truth hurts, but secrets destroy. As if to punctuate her words, a police car pulled up. 2 officers stepped out, and Quinn straightened her shoulders. That's my cue, she said quietly. Time to make my statement official. I'll go with you, our father said. My statement too. Aurora hugged them both before they left with the officers. The media surged forward again, but Tiffany and Susan created a barrier, guiding us back inside. In the quiet of the lobby, Aurora finally let her composure crack. I need to get out of this dress. I'll help, Susan offered, then looked at me. Both of us? I nodded, understanding the olive branch being extended. Hector watched them go, then turned to me. Those letters you wrote, every single one talked about how much you loved me, how much you wanted me. I never stopped wanting you, never stopped loving you. I know that now. He pulled out the last letter from his pocket. This one's different, though. It's recent. I recognized it, the letter I'd written but never sent after meeting him 6 months ago. You knew then, he said. You wrote about seeing your smile on my face, about hearing Dad's laugh in mine. Why didn't you tell me right away? Because I was afraid. Of losing you again. Of hurting Aurora. Of facing what my silence had allowed to happen. Fear makes us do terrible things, he said. Keep terrible secrets. Not anymore, I promised. No more secrets. Aurora and Susan returned. Aurora now in simple clothes, looking more like herself. So, she said, what now? Now we figure out how to be a family, Susan answered. All of us. Together, Hector added, reaching for both his mother's hands. Aurora joined our circle, completing it. Outside, cameras still flashed, police lights still pulsed, and somewhere Bentley was running from his crimes. Our family's story would be headlines tomorrow, next week, maybe longer. But standing there holding hands with my children and the woman who'd raised my son, I knew we'd find our way through. Not because it would be easy. It wouldn't. Not because the pain was gone. It wasn't. But because the truth, however hard, had finally set us free. Together, I echoed, and felt their hands tighten around mine in response. The secrets were out. The healing could begin. The wedding invitation sat on my desk like a ticking bomb, its gold-embossed letters mocking me with every glance. I hadn't stepped foot in my hometown for 10 years, and now my cousin wanted me to be her maid of honor. The irony wasn't lost on me. The forgotten daughter, suddenly important enough to stand beside the bride. I'm June, and the last time I saw my parents, they made it crystal clear that a daughter wasn't what they had planned for their legacy. If only you were born a boy, my mother would say, shaking her head while serving dinner to my father first. Always first. My phone buzzed. Chelsea's name flashed across the screen. June, did you get the invitation? Her excitement crackled through the speaker. Yeah, just looking at it now. I traced the edges of the envelope with my finger. Are you sure about this? Your parents might not. Stop right there, she cut in. It's my wedding, and you're the only person I want standing next to me. Besides, Francisco adores you. He says you're the kind of woman who makes things happen. I smiled despite myself. My tech company had just closed its biggest deal yet, and the industry magazines were starting to take notice. That's sweet of him. But Chelsea, you know how things are with... They ask about you, you know, she said softly. Your parents. They see your name in the business sections. Mum says Aunt Eleanor keeps every article. My throat tightened. Funny way of showing it. 10 years of silence and they're collecting articles like proud parents. There's something else, Chelsea hesitated. They want to talk to you at the wedding. Your mum specifically asked if you'd be there. The familiar anger bubbled up, but I pushed it down. Did she say what about? No, but June. Things change. People change. I glanced at my laptop screen where a draft of our company's latest financial report waited for my review. The numbers were good. Better than good. We'd grown exponentially in the past 2 years. Listen, Chelsea, I need to think about this. The wedding's in 3 weeks. Please say yes. My office door opened and Rhett walked in, carrying 2 coffee cups. He raised an eyebrow at my expression. I'll call you back, I told Chelsea, hanging up. Wedding drama? Rhett placed a cup on my desk. You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse. My parents want to talk. He sat down, leaning forward. The same parents who told you that investing in your education was a waste because you'd just end up someone's wife? The very same. I took a sip of coffee. Chelsea says they've changed. People don't change that much, June. They just get better at hiding who they are. He paused. Unless they need something. A new message popped up on my phone from Lisa, my childhood friend. Just heard you might come back for the wedding. Your mum was at the grocery store telling everyone how proud she is of her successful daughter. Something's up. I showed Rhett the message. He let out a low whistle. Suddenly proud, huh? Right when your company's making headlines? My thoughts exactly. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline I'd grown to love. You know what the worst part is? A tiny piece of me still wants their approval. Pathetic, right? Human, Rhett corrected. But don't let it cloud your judgment. You built all this, he gestured around the office, without them. While they were busy wishing for a son, you were becoming someone their imaginary heir could never match. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Chelsea. There's something else you should know. It's important. Can we talk? I showed Rhett the message. Go to the wedding, he said firmly. Whatever they want, whatever game they're playing, face it head on. You're not that scared teenager anymore. I picked up the invitation again, running my fingers over my name. June Spencer, not June Simmons. I'd changed my last name the day I left home, choosing my grandmother's maiden name, the only person in my family who had believed in me. "You're right," I told Rhett. "I'll go, but not for them." I pulled out my phone to text Chelsea. "I'm in, but first tell me everything." Her response came immediately. "Not over text. Can I come by your office tomorrow? There's a lot you need to know before you face them." I looked at Rhett, who was watching me with concern. "Whatever they're planning," I said, "they're about to learn that the daughter they didn't want grew up to be exactly who she needed to be." "That's my girl," Rhett grinned. "Now, shall we review that financial report? Something tells me you're going to want those numbers fresh in your mind." I nodded, already wondering what Chelsea needed to tell me and why my parents had suddenly decided their daughter was worth acknowledging. Whatever it was, I had a feeling this wedding was going to be about much more than just saying I do. Chelsea's revelation hit me like a bucket of ice water. They're losing everything, June. The family business, the house, all of it. Dad says Uncle Norman made some bad investments and now they're desperate. We sat in my office, the city lights twinkling behind us as evening settled in. Chelsea clutched her coffee cup, her engagement ring catching the light. "So, that's why they suddenly remember they have a daughter," I said, the pieces falling into place. "How much?" "They need at least $500,000 to stay afloat." Chelsea wouldn't meet my eyes. "Aunt Eleanor's been telling everyone how successful you are, how proud they are of their brilliant daughter." I laughed, but there was no humour in it. 10 years of silence and now they're proud? Because they need money? "I know it's awful." Chelsea reached across the desk to squeeze my hand. "I just thought you should know before the wedding. They're planning to approach you there." "At your wedding? They'd really do that?" "They think you won't make a scene. Public image and all that." She rolled her eyes. "You know how they are." My phone buzzed. A text from Lisa. "Just drove past your old house. For sale signs up. You okay?" "Does everyone know except me?" I showed Chelsea the message. "Small town, remember? But listen, there's more. Francisco and I overheard them at the rehearsal dinner last night. They're telling people you offered to help, that you're coming home to save the family business." The anger I'd suppressed for years threatened to bubble over. "They're already spending my money." "June?" Chelsea hesitated. "What are you going to do?" Before I could answer, Rhett burst into the office. "You need to see this." He turned his tablet toward us, showing a local news website. There was my father standing in front of his failing business, quoted in an article about family enterprises facing challenges. "We're fortunate that our daughter has agreed to step in," I read aloud. "Family always comes together in times of need." My hands shook. They're painting themselves as proud parents whose successful daughter is rushing home to help. They're trying to back me into a corner. "That's not all." Rhett scrolled down. "They're hosting a welcome home dinner for you the night before the wedding. Already announced it in the society pages." Chelsea looked mortified. "June, I'm so sorry. If I'd known they'd go this far." "It's not your fault." I stood up, pacing the office. "They're still playing the same games, just with higher stakes." "What's your plan?" Rhett asked, knowing that look in my eye. I stopped pacing. "I'm going to that dinner, and to the wedding, but not as the dutiful daughter they're expecting." "June," Chelsea warned, "whatever you're thinking." "Don't worry," I assured her. "I won't ruin your wedding, but I'm done letting them control the narrative. They want to use me for money? Fine. Let's see how they handle it when I use their precious public image against them." My phone rang. My mother's number. After 10 years, she was finally calling. "Put it on speaker," Rhett suggested. I answered. "Hello, Mother." "June, darling." Her voice was syrupy sweet. "We're so excited about the dinner. Everyone's talking about it. Your father and I have missed you terribly." "Have you?" I kept my voice neutral. "That's funny because I don't remember hearing from you for the past decade." A pause. "The past is the past, dear. We're just so proud of what you've accomplished. A mother always knows her child's potential." I caught Rhett's eye. He was shaking his head in disbelief. "Does she?" I asked. "I seem to remember you having very different opinions about my potential." "June, Her voice hardened slightly. That's all water under the bridge. We have so much to discuss when you're home. Such exciting opportunities for the family. I'm sure we do. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. I'm looking forward to it. After hanging up, I turned to Chelsea and Rhett. They want to play Happy Families? Perfect. I'll give them exactly what they want right up until I don't. June. Chelsea looked worried. What are you planning? Something that'll make them wish they'd never remembered they had a daughter. I picked up the wedding invitation. But first, I need to make a few calls. If they want to talk about money, let's talk about money. Rhett grinned. Need any help? Actually, yes. I turned to Chelsea. I'm still your maid of honor, and I promise your wedding won't be collateral damage. But afterward, they're going to learn that the daughter they dismissed isn't just successful. She's learned how to play their game better than they ever could. As Chelsea left, Rhett stayed behind. You sure about this? They taught me one valuable lesson, I said, pulling up my company's financial records. Image is everything. It's time they learned how that lesson can backfire. The welcome home dinner was exactly as I expected, a carefully orchestrated show of family unity. My mother had arranged everything perfectly, from the fresh flowers to the strategic seating of influential guests. I wore my most expensive suit, playing my part. June, darling, my mother air-kissed my cheeks as I arrived. You look wonderful. Success clearly agrees with you. Mother, I smiled, matching her artificial warmth. You've outdone yourself with the arrangements. Well, we had to celebrate properly, she lowered her voice. Everyone who matters is here. I scanned the room. Local business owners, family friends, even a reporter from the local paper. All carefully selected witnesses to the prodigal daughter's return. My father approached, champagne in hand. There's my girl. I was just telling Richard about your company's impressive growth. Richard, a bank manager I remembered from childhood, nodded enthusiastically. Remarkable achievements, June. Your father's been sharing the numbers. Has he? I raised an eyebrow. Interesting, considering I haven't shared those numbers with him. An awkward silence fell. My father laughed too loudly. Always the joker, this one. Lisa appeared at my side, squeezing my arm in silent support. June, let me grab you a drink. At the bar, she whispered, They've been talking you up all evening. Your mum's practically glowing with maternal pride. 10 years too late, I muttered, accepting a glass of wine. June, my father's voice behind me. Could we have a moment? In private? I followed him to his study, the same room where he'd once told me that investing in my business education was pointless because no one takes women executives seriously. He closed the door. You've done well for yourself. No thanks to you. Now, June, he straightened his tie. Let's not dwell on the past. We're family. Family supports each other. Does it? I sat in his leather chair, and watched him flinch. Like you supported me? We may have made mistakes, he paced the room, but we're proud of you now. And with your help, we could rebuild everything. Make it a true family enterprise. How much do you need? He named the figure, larger than what Chelsea had mentioned. That's a significant investment, I said carefully. Investment? He laughed. June, we're your parents. This is about family, not business. Everything's business with you, Father. You taught me that. A knock at the door. My mother entered, closing it behind her. Is everything settled? Our daughter seems to think this is a business transaction, my father said tightly. Isn't it? I stood up. You haven't spoken to me in 10 years. Now you're hosting dinners, bragging about my success, telling people I'm coming home to save the family business, all without asking me first. We're your parents, my mother stepped forward. We have a right to what? My money? The success you said I'd never achieve? I moved toward the door. You know what's funny? If you'd just called, apologized, shown any genuine remorse, I might have helped. But this? I gestured toward the party outside. This manipulation. June, my father's voice hardened. Think carefully about your next move. Your reputation. My reputation? I laughed. I built that without you, just like I built everything else you're trying to take credit for. People are watching, my mother hissed. They expect what you told them to expect. That's your problem, not mine. I opened the door, but turned back one last time. I'll see you at Chelsea's wedding. I'm sure you'll be proud to have your successful daughter give a speech. Their faces paled simultaneously. Back at the party, Lisa intercepted me. You okay? Perfect, I smiled at the curious onlookers. Just discussing some exciting family business opportunities. The reporter perked up. Any comments about the rumoured family enterprise expansion? Oh yes, I said clearly. I'll be making a very special announcement at the wedding, something that'll make my parents incredibly proud. My mother, who had followed me out, froze mid-step. Really? The reporter scribbled frantically. Care to give us a hint? Let's just say, I raised my voice slightly, it's about family legacy, about making sure the right people benefit from success. My father's hand gripped his champagne glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. Lisa whispered, What are you planning? Justice, I murmured back, served cold with a side of karma. As I left the party, I heard my mother making excuses about my jet lag. But I didn't care. Let them spend the next few days wondering what I'd do. Let them taste the anxiety they'd fed me for years. The wedding was in 2 days and I had preparations to make. They wanted their successful daughter to make a statement. I'd give them one they'd never forget. You're doing what? Rhett's voice crackled through my phone's speaker as I paced my hotel room. June, that's either brilliant or insane. Maybe both, I said, reviewing the documents on my laptop. The paperwork's ready. I just need to make it public at the right moment. Lisa burst into my room waving her phone. Have you seen this? She pulled up a local news article. Local success story returns. Family reconciliation leads to business merger. They're still pushing the narrative, I muttered, even after last night. Your mum's been calling everyone. Lisa sat on the bed. Damage control. Saying you were tired from travel, that everything's proceeding as planned. My phone buzzed. Chelsea calling. June? Are you sure about tomorrow? Don't worry about your wedding, I assured her. The reception speech is when everything happens. Your ceremony will be perfect. It's not that, she hesitated. Your mum just called Francisco's parents. She's telling everyone you're making a major investment announcement during your speech. Rhett, still on speaker, laughed. They really don't know when to quit, do they? A knock at my door. Lisa opened it to find Francisco standing there, looking concerned. June, he stepped in. We need to talk. Your father cornered my dad at the rehearsal dinner. He's basically promised them a business partnership through you. Of course he has. I closed my laptop. They're trying to force my hand by creating expectations. It's more than that, Francisco sat down. They're leveraging these promises for immediate loans, using your supposed involvement as collateral. What? I stood up sharply. That's fraud. Only if you don't follow through, Lisa pointed out. They're betting you won't humiliate them publicly. Watch me. I pulled out my phone, dialing my lawyer. Sarah, move forward with everything we discussed. Yes, tomorrow. And contact the SEC about those unauthorized promises. After hanging up, I turned to Francisco. I need a favor. Can you make sure my speech is moved to right after dinner? Before anyone leaves? He nodded. Already done. Chelsea suggested it. Perfect. I opened my laptop again. Now, about that charity foundation. The one you're announcing tomorrow. Lisa peered at my screen. How much are you actually donating? Everything they asked for, plus interest. I showed her the figures. But instead of bailing them out, it's going to help girls who've been told they're not enough. Rhett whistled through the phone. That's going to leave a mark. June. Francisco looked worried. They're going to lose everything. They already lost everything that mattered, I replied. They just don't know it yet. Another knock. This time it was my mother. Lisa quickly closed my laptop as she entered. June, darling, we need to discuss tomorrow's announcement. She looked pointedly at my friends. Privately. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of them. She pressed her lips together. Fine. Your father's arranged everything. When you announce the investment, Who said I'm announcing an investment? She faltered. But you must. We've already told everyone. That's your problem, Mother, making promises about money that isn't yours. We're your parents. Really? I stood up. Where were you when I needed parents? When I was building my company from nothing? When I changed my name because I couldn't bear to carry yours? She flinched. We made mistakes. No, I cut her off. Mistakes are forgetting birthdays or missing school events. What you did was systematic emotional abuse, and now you want to profit from the success I achieved despite you? You ungrateful. She caught herself, aware of our audience. Think about what you're doing. Your father's reputation will be exactly what he deserves. I opened the door. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a speech to finish. After she left, Francisco let out a low whistle. That was intense. Tomorrow will be worse, Lisa warned. Tomorrow will be justice, I corrected, reopening my laptop. Rhett, is everything set on your end? Press release ready to go the moment you finish your speech, he confirmed. Local and national media already interested. Good. I pulled up my speech document. Because tomorrow, my parents are going to learn that the daughter they never wanted grew up to be exactly who she needed to be, someone who won't let them hurt anyone else the way they hurt me. Lisa hugged me. Want us to stay while you practice? No, I smiled. I've got this. 10 years of practice, remember? As they left, I looked at the speech one last time. Tomorrow, at my cousin's wedding reception, I would finally say everything I'd held back for a decade. And I would do it in a way that would make it impossible for my parents to twist the narrative. They wanted their successful daughter to make a statement. They were about to get exactly what they asked for. Chelsea's wedding was beautiful. As maid of honor, I stood beside her, watching her marry Francisco with genuine joy. My parents sat in the front row, practically glowing with anticipation of my upcoming announcement. The local newspaper photographer kept his lens trained on our family exactly as they'd planned. At the reception, my mother worked the room like a politician, dropping hints about the exciting family business news to come. My father huddled with potential investors, making promises he thought I'd have to keep. Lisa squeezed my arm. You okay? Never better. I watched the servers clearing dinner plates. Almost time. Francisco's father approached, beaming. June. Norman's been telling me about the merger plans. Brilliant strategy. Has he? I smiled pleasantly. How interesting. The DJ's voice cut through the chatter. And now we'll hear from our maid of honor, June. My mother practically pushed people aside to get a better view, her camera ready. The local reporter flipped to a fresh page in his notebook. I stepped up to the microphone, my hands steady. The speech I'd prepared felt like a weapon, loaded and ready. When Chelsea asked me to be her maid of honor, I was touched. Family hasn't always been... I paused, meeting my mother's eyes. Straightforward for me. The room quieted. My father's smile flickered. You see, I learned early that family isn't just about blood. It's about who believes in you when you have nothing, who supports you when you're told you're not enough. My mother's camera lowered slightly. Chelsea was there when I started my company, when everyone said a woman couldn't succeed in tech, when my own parents... I let the words hang, watching them squirm. Well, let's just say they had different expectations. The reporter's pen scratched frantically. But today isn't about the past. It's about the future. About legacy. I pulled out an envelope. My parents have been telling everyone about an exciting business announcement. They're right. I do have one. My father sat up straighter, triumphant. Several investors leaned forward. I'm announcing the creation of the Spencer Foundation for Girls in Technology, funded with an initial endowment of $1 million, twice what my parents recently asked me for. The room erupted in murmurs. My mother's camera clattered to the table. This foundation will support girls who've been told they're not enough, who've been denied opportunities because of their gender, who've had to build themselves from nothing. My father half rose, but my mother grabbed his arm. Every year, we'll provide full scholarships to girls who dream bigger than their circumstances, who refuse to let anyone define their worth. I looked directly at my parents, who know that real family supports you without conditions. The reporter was practically vibrating with excitement. And to launch this initiative, I'm partnering with several women-led tech firms to provide mentorship programs. Because sometimes I smiled at Lisa, at Chelsea, at all the people who'd actually supported me. The family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into. I raised my glass. To Chelsea and Francisco, thank you for showing me what real family love looks like. The applause was thunderous. My father stormed out, followed by several confused investors. My mother sat frozen, her carefully crafted narrative crumbling around her. Chelsea hugged me, whispering, "That was perfect." The reporter rushed over. "June, can you comment on your parents' recent statements about a family business merger?" "I'm afraid they spoke without consulting me," I said clearly. "Any statements they've made about my involvement in their business ventures are incorrect." "And the loans they've secured based on your supposed investment?" "I know nothing about those," I replied. "But I'm sure the relevant authorities will be interested in investigating any fraudulent claims." My mother finally approached, her face tight. "June, how could you—" "How could I what, Mother?" "Help others instead of enabling you. Create something meaningful instead of bailing out your failed business. We're your parents." "No," I cut her off. "You're people who gave birth to me. Parents support their children. Parents love unconditionally. You've done neither." The reporter caught every word. Lisa appeared with my coat. "Ready to go?" I nodded, then turned back to my mother. "The Foundation's first scholarship will be awarded next month. You're welcome to attend the ceremony. As guests, not parents. Maybe you'll learn something about what real family support looks like." As we left, I heard the buzz of conversations, saw the reporter already typing on his phone, noticed my mother's frozen smile as she tried to salvage what was left of her social standing. "You did it," Lisa grinned. "No," I corrected her, feeling lighter than I had in years. "We did it, all of us who showed me what real family means." Behind us, the reception continued, but the story everyone would remember wasn't about Chelsea's wedding. It was about a daughter who turned her parents' manipulation into something powerful, something good. And that was the best revenge of all. The morning after the wedding, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. The local paper's headline read, "Tech CEO announces $1 million foundation, reveals family rift." My mother had called 17 times. "You've gone viral," Rhett announced, barging into my hotel room with coffee and his tablet. National media's picking up the story. Daughter turns parents' manipulation into force for good. Lisa looked up from her phone. "Your mom's doing damage control on social media. Says it's all a misunderstanding." "Is that why she's been calling non-stop?" I took a sip of coffee. "Or because the bank's probably already calling about those loans?" My phone rang again. Francisco this time. "June, you need to come to the hotel restaurant now." "What's wrong?" "Your father's here with his investors. It's getting ugly." I grabbed my jacket. "Time to face the music." Lisa and Rhett followed me down. The scene in the restaurant was exactly what I'd expected. My father, red-faced, surrounded by angry men in suits. "There she is," he shouted as I entered. "Tell them this is all a misunderstanding." "What exactly should I tell them, Father? That you lied about my involvement? That you secured loans using my name without permission?" One of the investors stepped forward. "Is it true you knew nothing about the merger plans?" "Not only did I not know, but I have documentation proving they acted without my consent." I pulled out my phone, showing emails from my lawyer. "I've already reported the unauthorized use of my name to the relevant authorities." "You ungrateful little—" My father lunged forward, but Francisco blocked his path. "Think carefully about your next move," Francisco warned. "There are witnesses." My mother burst in, looking frantic. "June, please, we can fix this. Just tell everyone you've changed your mind." "Changed my mind?" I laughed. "About what? The foundation that's already legally established? The press release that's gone viral? Or the fraud investigation that's probably starting right now?" "Fraud?" One of the investors paled. "Norman, you said this was a done deal." "It was supposed to be," my father sputtered. "She's our daughter. She's supposed to—" "To what?" I cut in. Sacrifice my reputation to save yours, clean up your mess, be the son you always wanted. The restaurant had gone silent, everyone watching the drama unfold. We gave you everything, my mother cried. You gave me nothing but doubt and disappointment. Everything I have, I built myself. And now you want to take credit for it? Another investor stood up. I'm calling my lawyer. This is serious misrepresentation. Wait, my father pleaded. We can work something out. Like you worked something out with me? I turned to the investors. I suggest you all contact your legal representatives. I'm happy to provide documentation showing I never agreed to any of these deals. My mother grabbed my arm. You're destroying your father's reputation. No, Mother, he did that himself. I'm just refusing to save it. Rhett stepped forward, tablet in hand. Should I send that second press release now? The one about the unauthorized loans? My father's face went from red to white. You wouldn't dare. Try me. I moved closer, lowering my voice. You taught me that image is everything, remember? Now you get to watch yours crumble just like you tried to crumble mine. Ms. Spencer. A new voice, a reporter who'd apparently been having breakfast. Would you care to comment on the situation? Actually, yes, I smiled, knowing this would be the final nail in their coffin. I'd like to announce that the Spencer Foundation's first initiative will focus specifically on helping young women whose families have tried to limit their potential. We'll be partnering with domestic abuse organizations to identify candidates. My mother's grip on my arm went slack. Domestic abuse? The reporter's eyebrows shot up. Are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that emotional and financial abuse are just as damaging as physical abuse, and that it's time we help people break free from toxic family dynamics. The investors were already leaving, phones pressed to their ears. My father looked shell-shocked, his carefully built world collapsing around him. You've ruined us, he whispered. No, I corrected him. You ruined yourselves. I just refused to be your safety net. Lisa appeared at my side. Your car's ready. We should head to the airport. I turned to leave, then paused. The foundation's first ceremony is in a month. I meant what I said. You're welcome to attend. As guests. Maybe watching other parents support their daughters will teach you something. As we walked out, I heard my mother start to cry, heard my father trying to call after his fleeing investors. But for the first time in my life, their drama wasn't my problem. You okay? Lisa asked as we reached the car. Better than okay, I smiled, watching the hotel shrink in the rearview mirror. I'm free. 1 month later, I stood on stage at the Spencer Foundation's inaugural ceremony. The auditorium was packed with young women, their families, and media representatives. My parents' empty seats in the front row spoke volumes. Our first scholarship recipient, I announced, is Maria, a 17-year-old whose father told her that girls don't belong in engineering. Maria stepped forward, beaming. Her mother wiped tears from her eyes, clapping loudly. With this scholarship, Maria will attend MIT next fall. But more importantly, she'll know that her dreams are valid, her ambitions are worthy, and her gender is not a limitation. The applause was deafening. From the side of the stage, Lisa gave me a thumbs up. A commotion at the back of the auditorium caught my attention. My mother slipped in, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. She took a seat in the last row, clutching her purse like a shield. I continued with the ceremony, introducing each recipient. Rebecca, who built a robotics program at her underfunded school. Sarah, who developed an app to help domestic violence survivors. Ashley, who... The auditorium doors opened again. My father walked in, hesitating before sitting next to my mother. Their presence didn't feel like victory or defeat, just a footnote in a bigger story. After the ceremony, during the reception, Lisa nudged me. Your mum's heading this way. She approached tentatively, looking lost among the celebrating families. June, Yes? Your father's business is gone, she said quietly. The house, too. The investigators found everything. I know. I watched Maria hugging her proud mother. The local paper kept me informed. We're moving in with your aunt. She twisted her wedding ring. Your father's looking for work, but at his age... Are you here for sympathy or money? I asked directly. Because I'm fresh out of both. I'm here because, she glanced around at the happy families, because I watched that girl's mother hugging her, celebrating her dreams instead of crushing them, and I realized, I never did that for you. No, you didn't. Is it too late? Her voice cracked. To learn how? Before I could answer, Maria bounded over. Ms. Spencer, my mum wants to thank you personally. Maria's mother followed, radiating pride. What you're doing here? It's changing lives, showing these girls they can be anything. My mother watched this exchange, her expression unreadable. That's the goal, I smiled at Maria, to make sure no girl feels limited by other people's expectations. June, my mother spoke softly, could I volunteer? With the foundation? Learn how to support girls like I should have supported you. I studied her face, looking for manipulation, but finding only regret. The foundation always needs volunteers, but you'd be starting at the bottom. No special treatment. I understand. And father? She shook her head. He's not ready. Maybe never will be, but I need to do this for myself, for all the times I failed you. Rhett appeared with news updates on his tablet. The story's still growing. More companies want to partner with the foundation. We're getting scholarship applications from all over the country. My mother turned to leave, but I caught her arm. Thursday mornings, that's when we train new volunteers. Don't be late. Her eyes welled up. Thank you. As she walked away, Lisa whispered, Are you sure about this? No, I admitted. But this foundation is about breaking cycles. Maybe it's time to break this one too. The reception continued around us. Girls taking selfies with their acceptance letters, parents hugging their daughters, dreams taking flight. My father had left already, unable to watch this celebration of everything he'd fought against. Maria's mother approached again. Your parents? Are they proud of all this? My father isn't, I said honestly. My mother is learning to be. But the real pride? I gestured to the room full of celebrating families. It's watching parents like you support your daughters without condition. That's what this foundation is about. Well, we're proud of you, she said firmly. All of us. Later, as we packed up, Rhett showed me more news updates. My father's business collapse, the investigation findings, the community's reaction. Karma's real, Lisa commented. Maybe. I watched my mother helping clean up, trying to find her place in this new world. But so is growth. If she's genuine about learning, then this foundation will have changed one more life, Rhett finished. I looked around the auditorium, now empty except for echoes of joy and possibility. My revenge had transformed into something bigger than family drama. It had become a force for change. Ready to go? Lisa asked. Almost. I took one last look at the stage, just remembering something my father used to say about legacy. Turns out he was right, just not in the way he meant. We left together, leaving behind the weight of old expectations and carrying forward the promise of new beginnings. The Spencer Foundation's office buzzed with activity as I reviewed applications with our team. My mother sat at a volunteer desk, carefully organising candidate files. 3 months of showing up every Thursday had earned her a regular position, though some staff still watched her warily. June, she approached my desk hesitantly. You should see this application. I took the file, reading the girl's story. 16, brilliant at coding, parents refusing to support her dreams, history repeating itself. Her situation. My mother's voice wavered. It's like looking in a mirror, isn't it? The difference is she'll get support. I pressed the approval stamp on the application. That's why we're here. Lisa burst into the office, waving her phone. Your father's on the local news. She pulled up the video. There he was being interviewed outside his new job, a junior position at a small firm. I lost everything, he said to the camera, because I couldn't accept that times have changed. My daughter, he paused, looking directly at the lens. She proved me wrong about everything. Turn it off, I said quietly. He's been asking about you, my mother ventured, watching all the foundation's progress. Good for him. I turned back to the applications. Rhett walked in with Chelsea and Francisco. Surprise inspection. We brought lunch. And news, Chelsea added. We're having a baby. A girl. The office erupted in cheers. My mother hung back, uncertain of her place in this celebration. Have you told your parents? I asked Chelsea. Yes. And, she hesitated. Uncle Norman asked if you'd be the godmother. He said, and I quote, she'd teach her to be strong. The room went quiet. My mother dropped a stack of files. Did he now? I kept my voice neutral. Interesting timing. He's changed, June, my mother said softly. We both have. Watching you build this, help these girls. It's shown us everything we did wrong. Mom, I finally looked at her directly. You've proven you want to change. You show up, you do the work, you face your mistakes. But him? One TV interview and a message through Chelsea doesn't erase everything. I know, but the office door opened again. My father stood there, looking uncomfortable in his off-the-rack suit. What are you doing here? I stood up. I came to apply. He held up a volunteer form. To learn, like your mother has. Lisa moved protectively closer to me. Rhett crossed his arms. Why now? I demanded. Because I was wrong. He stepped forward. About everything. About you, about women in business, about what makes a legacy worthwhile. He gestured around the office. This is worth more than any business I ever built. It's not that simple. I know. He placed the volunteer form on a desk. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to learn, to understand, to do better. Like Mom has. She's braver than me. Always was. Took me losing everything to see that. He looked around at the application files. Each of these is a girl I would have dismissed, like I dismissed you. Chelsea stepped forward. June, remember what you said at the foundation launch? About breaking cycles? I picked up his volunteer form. Bottom rung. No special treatment. One mistake. One attempt to take credit or control. And you're out. Understood. And the godmother thing? I meant it, he said quietly. You're everything I should have been proud of from the start. I handed the form to my mother. Put him in next Thursday's training group, regular volunteer track. He nodded, turning to leave. Dad? He stopped. Why did you really come? Because watching you succeed despite me made me realize I didn't fail as a father because I had a daughter. I failed as a father because I couldn't see how lucky I was to have you. The office remained silent as he left. My mother wiped her eyes. Well, Rhett broke the tension. Shall we eat this lunch before it gets cold? As everyone gathered around, I watched my mother explaining procedures to new volunteers. Through the window, I saw my father get into his modest used car. Such a change from his former luxury sedan. You okay? Lisa asked. You know what? I smiled, looking at the approved application in my hands, the girl whose parents didn't believe in her. I really am. Because this was never about revenge, it was about change, and sometimes change has to start with us. Chelsea hugged me. So, about that godmother thing. Let's see how Thursday's training goes first, I laughed. One step at a time. The foundation office hummed with activity, applications being processed, dreams being supported, cycles being broken. My parents were learning slowly what they should have known all along. That true legacy isn't about control or expectations. It's about giving others the chance to soar.
The crystal wine glass shattered in my grip, sending shards across the marble kitchen counter. I barely noticed the small cut on my palm, too focused on Emily's words still ringing in my ears. I just think it's such a waste, don't you? A woman your age without children. I mean, what do you even do with your time, Gwen? My name is Gwendolyn, and I've spent the last decade enduring my sister-in-law's not-so-subtle jabs at family gatherings. Today was supposed to be a celebration of Rowan's promotion, but somehow Emily had managed to turn it into another reminder of my supposed shortcomings. Here, let me help you with that, Rowan said, already reaching for the paper towels. His gentle touch on my shoulder spoke volumes. He knew how much these moments hurt. "Oh, Gwen's always been a bit clumsy," Emily called from the dining room. "Maybe it's for the best she doesn't have little ones running around. Imagine the accidents." I caught Patricia's eye across the room. My best friend had stopped by to drop off some files for work and now stood frozen by the doorway, her expression a mirror of my internal rage. She knew the truth, the whole truth, and I could see her fighting the urge to speak up. "Emily," Rowan's voice carried a warning tone. "That's enough." "What?" "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Even Mom mentioned it last Christmas. Then maybe everyone should mind their own business," I snapped, surprising myself with the force in my voice. The room fell silent. Desmond, Emily's husband, cleared his throat uncomfortably. Honey, maybe we should—" "No, Des, I'm tired of walking on eggshells. We're family. We should be able to discuss these things openly." Emily stood up, wine glass in hand, approaching the kitchen island. "I mean, Rowan deserves to be a father. Have you two even tried fertility treatments? Or are you just—" The sharp ring of a phone cut through the tension. Desmond fumbled for his cell, frowning at the screen. "It's the hospital," he said, stepping away to answer. I busied myself cleaning up the broken glass, trying to ignore the way my hands trembled. Patricia moved closer, pretending to help while whispering, "You okay?" "I'm fine," I muttered, though we both knew it was a lie. The weight of my secret pressed against my chest, threatening to burst out. If they only knew about Natalie. "Yes, this is he." Desmond's voice had taken on an odd tone. "What? When did— Yes, I understand. We'll be right there." The color had drained from his face when he returned to the kitchen. "That was Dr. Matthews. My test results came back. They found something. I need to go in right away." Emily's wine glass joined mine in pieces on the floor. "What do you mean, something? Des, what's wrong?" The room erupted into chaos. Emily crying, Desmond trying to calm her while clearly terrified himself, Rowan already grabbing car keys. In the midst of it all, I caught Patricia's knowing look. We both understood that everything was about to change. "I'll drive," Rowan announced, taking charge. Des, you're in no state. Gwen?" I nodded, already reaching for my coat. As we headed for the door, I heard Patricia's soft voice. "Call me later." The drive to the hospital was tense, filled with Emily's quiet sobs and Desmond's labored breathing. I sat in the back, watching the streetlights blur past, thinking about karma and consequences. For years, Emily had wielded her fertility like a weapon, never knowing the truth about why we chose not to have children. Or rather, why we chose to keep our child a secret. Now, watching her world potentially crumble, I felt no satisfaction, just a hollow ache and the growing certainty that our carefully constructed facade was about to collapse. Rowan caught my eye in the rearview mirror. In that brief glance, I saw the same fear I felt. We both knew what might be coming. The possibility that Desmond's condition might require family medical history, blood tests, donors, the very things we'd structured our entire lives around avoiding. As we pulled into the emergency room parking lot, my phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Natalie's asking about dinner tomorrow. What should I tell her?" I stared at the screen, Emily's earlier words echoing in my head. "We're family. We should be able to discuss these things openly." If she only knew how open things were about to become. The automatic doors of the ER slid open with a hiss, welcoming us into what I knew would be the beginning of the end of our secret. One way or another, everything was about to change. The fluorescent lights of the hospital waiting room made everything feel surreal. Emily paced back and forth while Rowan filled out paperwork, his handwriting more rushed than usual. I sat quietly, my phone burning a hole in my pocket with Patricia's unanswered text about Natalie. "Mrs. Phillips?" A doctor in blue scrubs appeared, clipboard in hand. "I'm Dr. Matthews. We need to discuss your husband's condition." Emily practically lunged forward. "What's wrong with him? Is he going to be okay?" The doctor gestured toward the chairs. "Please sit down. We've found that Desmond has a rare form of aplastic anemia. His bone marrow isn't producing enough blood cells, and his condition is deteriorating rapidly." "What does that mean?" Emily's voice cracked. "What do we do?" "He needs a blood transfusion immediately, but his blood type is extremely rare. We're looking at a combination of factors that make finding a match challenging." Rowan stepped forward. "I'm his brother, can't I?" "We've already tested your previous donations, Mr. Chapman. Unfortunately, you're not a match for what we need." Dr. Matthews consulted his clipboard. "We need to test all immediate family members as soon as possible." Emily was already rolling up her sleeve. "Take mine. Test mine right now." I watched as the nurse drew Emily's blood, followed by more samples from Rowan. The waiting room clock ticked loudly in the silence. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. "How long until we know?" Emily demanded. "We'll rush the tests, but it could still be a few hours," the nurse replied. "In the meantime, we're searching the national database for potential matches." Emily turned to me suddenly. "Gwen, you should get tested too. You never know." I froze. I don't think." "Please." She grabbed my hand, all traces of her usual condescension gone. "Please, I know we have our differences, but this is Desmond's life we're talking about." Rowan caught my eye, a silent conversation passing between us. We both knew what the tests might reveal, not about me, but about someone else. "I'll do it," I said quietly, rolling up my sleeve. The next 3 hours were excruciating. Emily alternated between crying and making frantic phone calls to family members. Rowan paced the hallway, occasionally disappearing to make his own calls. I sat frozen, my mind racing through scenarios, each worse than the last. Finally, Dr. Matthews returned, his expression grim. "I'm sorry, but none of you are matches." Emily collapsed into a chair, her shoulders shaking. What do we do now?" "We need to expand our search. Are there any other family members? Children? Cousins?" "We don't have children," Emily whispered, then shot me a look that for once held no malice, only desperation. "What about your side of the family, Gwen?" My throat went dry. I need some air." I practically ran to the hospital garden, Rowan close behind. The cool night air did nothing to calm my racing heart. "We have to tell them," I said, the words feeling like glass in my mouth. "Gwen, think about this. We agreed." "She's 13, Rowan, old enough to understand, old enough to make her own choice." I pulled out my phone, showing him Patricia's text. "And she's the only one who might be able to save Desmond's life. You don't know that she'll be a match. But I know her blood type. It's the same as her father's, the same as Desmond's. And given everything else," I trailed off, remembering the genetic counseling we'd received years ago. Rowan ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I knew meant he was conflicted. "This will change everything. Emily will never forgive us for keeping this secret." "Desmond could die, Rowan. Are we really going to let that happen just to keep our secret?" A nurse appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Chapman, your brother is asking for you." Rowan squeezed my hand before following the nurse. I pulled out my phone and dialed Patricia's number, my fingers trembling. "Patricia, I need you to bring Natalie to the hospital. Yes, now. It's time they knew the truth." As I ended the call, I caught sight of Emily through the hospital window, her face buried in her hands. The woman who had spent years making me feel less than, now brought low by circumstances beyond her control. I should have felt vindicated, but all I felt was tired. Tired of secrets, tired of pretending, tired of the walls we'd built around our lives. In 30 minutes, those walls would come crashing down, and nothing would ever be the same again. Patricia arrived first, her face etched with concern. "Natalie's in the car with Mark. Are you sure about this?" I nodded, though my stomach was in knots. Where else can we hide when someone's life is at stake? "You don't owe them anything, Gwen. After how Emily's treated you all these years, this isn't about Emily." I took a deep breath. It's about doing what's right, and about Natalie having the chance to know her family. Through the glass doors, I could see Natalie stepping out of Mark's car. Even from a distance, she looked so much like my sister Sarah. The same dark curls, the same way of holding herself. Mark's hand on her shoulder was protective, steadying. He'd been there the night Sarah died, had helped us make the decision that would shape the next 13 years. "Aunt Gwen," Natalie called out, her smile bright despite the late hour. "Patricia said Uncle Desmond is sick?" The word uncle hit differently now. "Yes, sweetie, but before we go in, we need to talk about something important." We found a quiet corner in the hospital garden. Mark stood watch near the entrance while Patricia sat beside Natalie on the bench. I knelt in front of her, taking her hands in mine. "You know how we've always told you about your mom, Sarah? About how she died right after you were born?" Natalie nodded. "And how you and Uncle Rowan arranged for Patricia to raise me because you weren't ready. That's not the whole truth." My voice cracked. "Sarah died because of complications during pregnancy. She was carrying twins." Natalie's eyes widened. "Twins?" "Yes, you and your brother. There were complications during delivery. Your brother didn't make it, and Sarah—" I squeezed her hands tighter. "Sarah was married to Desmond's cousin. He died in a car accident while Sarah was pregnant." "Wait." Natalie pulled back slightly. "Uncle Desmond? He's my uncle? Like, really my uncle?" "Yes, and that's why we need your help. He's very sick and he needs a blood transfusion. You might be the only person who can help him." Natalie was quiet for a long moment, processing. "Does he know about me?" "No one does, except the people here right now. We kept it secret to protect you, to give you a normal life without all the family complications. But now someone's life depends on it," she finished, showing wisdom beyond her years. "Will it hurt, the transfusion?" Patricia spoke up. "Just a little pinch. I'll be right there with you." "What about Emily? Will she be mad?" The question hung in the air. Mark stepped closer. "She might be, kiddo, but that's not your fault. The adults made these decisions, not you." I heard footsteps behind us and turned to see Rowan. His face was drawn with worry. "Desmond's getting worse. They're talking about moving him to intensive care." Natalie stood up, straightening her shoulders in a way that reminded me so much of Sarah it hurt. "I want to help, but can I meet him first, before everyone knows?" Rowan's eyes filled with tears. "Of course, sweetheart. I'll take you to his room." As Natalie walked away with Rowan, Patricia grabbed my arm. "What about Emily? She's going to explode when she finds out." "Let her," Mark said firmly. "Some secrets need to come to light, and maybe this will teach her some humility." I watched through the window as Rowan led Natalie to Desmond's room. Emily was at the nurse's station, filling out more paperwork. She glanced up as they passed, her expression confused but not yet suspicious. "I should go in there," I said, moving toward the door. "Gwen?" Mark's voice stopped me. "Remember what Sarah said that last night about family being more than blood?" I nodded, remembering my sister's final hours, how she made us promise to keep Natalie safe, to give her a life free from the weight of family expectations and obligations. "She also said that sometimes the truth sets us free," I replied. "I think it's time we all got free. Walking through those hospital doors felt like crossing a threshold. Behind me lay 13 years of secrets and careful arrangements. Ahead lay uncertainty, confrontation, and probably a lot of anger, but also maybe something better, something honest. Emily looked up as I approached, her mascara streaked from crying. "Who's that girl with Rowan? She looks so familiar." "Emily," I said, my voice steady for the first time in years. "We need to talk about Sarah." "Sarah?" Emily's brow furrowed. "Your sister, Sarah? The one who died in childbirth?" I guided her to the nearby waiting area, away from the busy nurses' station. Patricia and Mark followed, creating a protective barrier between us and the rest of the hospital. "Sarah was married to James, Desmond's cousin," I started, watching Emily's face carefully. "When she died, she left behind a daughter." Emily's eyes darted toward Desmond's room, where Natalie was still visible through the window. "That girl? No, that's impossible. We would have known. Desmond would have known. James died before the babies were born. Sarah made us promise." "Babies?" Emily's voice rose sharply. "What do you mean, babies?" I took a deep breath. "Twins, a boy and a girl. The boy didn't survive, and Sarah, she knew she wasn't going to make it. She made us promise to protect Natalie, to give her a normal life away from all the family drama." Emily stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. All these years you've let me talk about children, about family, and you had a niece. You let me believe." She stopped, realization dawning. "She looks just like Sarah." Through the window, we could see Natalie sitting beside Desmond's bed, talking quietly while Rowan stood watch. Even in his sedated state, Desmond seemed to respond to her presence. "She's the right blood type," I said softly. "She might be able to save him." Emily's face contorted with conflicting emotions. "How dare you? How dare you keep this from us? From Desmond? She's his family." "She's my family too," I shot back, finding strength in the words. "And I did what I thought was best for her. Sarah knew what this family was like, the expectations, the pressure. She wanted something different for her daughter." "What we're like?" Emily's voice cracked. "What's that supposed to mean?" Mark stepped forward. "I was there that night, Emily. Sarah was terrified that her daughter would be raised in a family where her worth would be measured by whose blood ran through her veins, where she'd be seen as an obligation rather than a person." Emily sank back into her chair, tears streaming down her face. "And now you're using her to save Desmond? How is that any different?" "We're not using her," Patricia interjected. "We gave her a choice. She wants to help." The door to Desmond's room opened, and Natalie emerged with Rowan. She walked directly to where we sat, her young face serious but determined. "I want to do the transfusion," she announced. "I want to help Uncle Desmond." Emily stared at her, really looking at her for the first time. "You know who I am?" "Aunt Emily, Patricia's shown me pictures sometimes. And," Natalie hesitated, glancing at me for support, "I've seen you at school events. I always wanted to say hi, but I knew I couldn't." Emily covered her mouth with her hand, a sob escaping. "All this time? You were right there?" "Patricia raised her just across town," I explained. "We arranged it so she could have a normal life, but still be close enough that we could be part of it." "Part of it?" Emily's voice turned bitter again. "You mean you got to be part of it, while the rest of us? The rest of you were too busy judging and measuring everyone else's lives," Rowan cut in sharply. "Can you blame us for wanting to protect her from that?" The silence that followed was heavy with 13 years of secrets and judgments. Finally, Natalie spoke again, her voice small but clear. "Mom, Sarah. She left me letters. She wrote about all of you. She said family was complicated but worth fighting for. I'd like to try if you'll let me. Emily looked up at her, then at me, her face a battlefield of pride and desperation. We need to test her blood type, make sure she's really a match. Already arranged, Rowan said. The doctors are ready whenever Natalie is. Natalie squared her shoulders. I'm ready now. As she walked away with the nurse, Emily caught my arm. Her grip was tight, her voice barely a whisper. If this works, if she saves him, nothing will ever be the same. I watched Natalie disappear around the corner, thinking of Sarah, of secrets, of the walls we build to protect ourselves and others. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. The sun was starting to rise outside the hospital windows, painting the sterile walls with hints of gold. A new day was dawning, and with it, the end of our carefully constructed facade. Whether we were ready or not, the truth was finally breaking free. The blood test results came back within the hour. Dr. Matthews could barely contain his relief as he delivered the news. She's a perfect match, he announced. Better than we could have hoped for, actually. The genetic markers are remarkably compatible. Emily, who had been sitting rigidly in the corner, let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Of course they are. She's family. The way she said family made me flinch, like it was both an accusation and a plea. Can we begin the transfusion immediately? Rowan asked. Yes, we're preparing everything now. Natalie's already in the treatment room with... Dr. Matthews glanced at his chart. Ms. Walker? Patricia, I corrected automatically. She's Natalie's legal guardian. Emily's head snapped up. Legal guardian? You mean you didn't even... This isn't the time, Mark interrupted firmly. Let's focus on Desmond. The next few hours passed in a blur of medical procedures and tense silences. I stationed myself outside the treatment room, watching through the window as Patricia held Natalie's hand while the nurses worked. My brave girl didn't flinch once as they inserted the needle. She looks just like her, Emily said quietly, appearing beside me. I keep thinking about all the times I must have passed her at school events, never knowing. She was in your daughter's class play last year, I admitted. She played the tree. The one with the beautiful solo? Emily's voice cracked. I recorded it on my phone. I have a video of my niece singing, and I didn't even know it. Before I could respond, Dr. Matthews emerged from Desmond's room. The initial response is promising. His vitals are already showing improvement. Emily sagged against the wall in relief. Can I see him? Briefly, he's still heavily sedated. As Emily disappeared into Desmond's room, Natalie emerged from her treatment, Patricia supporting her slightly wobbly steps. How are you feeling, sweetheart? I asked, rushing to her other side. A bit dizzy, she admitted. But okay. Did it work? Did I help Uncle Desmond? You did amazing, Rowan assured her, pulling up a chair. The doctors say he's already doing better. Natalie smiled weakly, then turned serious. What happens now? With everyone, I mean? Patricia squeezed her shoulder. Whatever you want to happen, honey. This doesn't change anything unless you want it to. But it already has changed, Natalie said, wisdom beyond her years showing in her eyes. And I think maybe it should. Emily emerged from Desmond's room just in time to hear this. She stood awkwardly at the edge of our group, looking lost, so different from her usual confident demeanor. I'd like to get to know you, she said softly to Natalie. If you'll let me. I know I don't deserve it, after how I've treated your aunt. You didn't know, Natalie said simply. That's no excuse, Emily replied, and for the first time in our entire relationship, I heard genuine remorse in her voice. I've been horrible to Gwen for years because of my own issues. I was so focused on what I thought family should look like that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. Sarah used to say you were actually really nice in high school, Natalie offered, before everything got complicated. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She did? You know stories about before? I have all her letters, Natalie said, and Aunt Gwen and Patricia tell me stories sometimes. Would you like to hear some of them? The olive branch was so unexpected, so graceful, that I had to turn away to hide my own tears. I felt Rowan's arm slip around my waist, steadying me. I'd love that, Emily whispered. But first, you need to rest. Doctor's orders. Patricia stepped forward. We should get her home. She needs to sleep off the effects of the donation. Wait, Emily said quickly. Could I have your phone number, just to check on you later? The simple request held so much weight. Acknowledgement, acceptance, the first tentative step toward something new. Natalie recited her number, and I watched Emily save it with trembling fingers. As Patricia and Mark helped Natalie toward the elevator, Emily turned to me. I know we have a lot to talk about, a lot to work through, but right now, I just want to say thank you for bringing her here, for saving Desmond, for... She gestured helplessly. Everything. She's the one you should thank, I replied. She chose to help despite everything. Just like Sarah would have, Emily said softly. We stood there in the hospital hallway, the morning sun streaming through the windows, illuminating all the broken pieces of our family story. But maybe, just maybe, those pieces could be reassembled into something stronger, something truer than before. 3 days after the transfusion, Desmond opened his eyes properly for the first time. The doctors called it a remarkable recovery. Emily called it a miracle. I called Patricia. He's asking about Natalie, I said into the phone. He wants to meet her, properly this time. She's been waiting by the phone, Patricia replied. Let me guess, family dinner? Emily's insisting on it, tonight at their house. Are you coming? Try and stop me. The house that had been the site of so many uncomfortable family gatherings looked different now. Emily had cleaned frantically all morning, rearranging furniture and fussing over place settings. When the doorbell rang, she nearly dropped the casserole dish she was holding. I'll get it, I offered, but she shook her head. No, I need to do this. I watched from the kitchen as Emily opened the door. Natalie stood there with Patricia, holding a bouquet of flowers and looking nervous. Hi, Aunt Emily, she said softly. Emily's carefully composed expression crumbled. You brought flowers? You shouldn't have. I mean, thank you. They're beautiful. Like you. The awkward moment was broken by Desmond's voice from the living room. Is that her? He was still pale, still weak, but sitting up in his favorite armchair. Rowan hovered nearby, ready to help if needed. Natalie approached slowly, the flowers forgotten in Emily's hands. Hello, Uncle Desmond, she said. My God, he breathed. You look just like her, just like Sarah. That's what everyone says. Come here, please. He patted the ottoman next to his chair. I have so many questions, but first, thank you for what you did, for being brave enough to help a stranger. You're not a stranger, Natalie replied. You're family. I've known about you my whole life. Emily made a choked sound from the doorway. We didn't know about you all this time. Maybe we could talk about that over dinner? I suggested, trying to ease the tension. The food's getting cold. Around the dining table, the conversation started hesitantly, then flowed more naturally as Natalie shared stories about growing up, about Patricia's terrible cooking attempts, about Mark teaching her to ride a bike, about secret visits to my house on weekends. Wait, Emily interrupted. All those times you said you were working late? I was with Natalie, I admitted. We didn't want to risk anyone seeing us together in public. It was like having a secret agent family, Natalie grinned. Patricia would drive me to Aunt Gwen's house in her car with the tinted windows. The black Honda? Emily's eyes widened. I've seen that car at school events. We were careful, Patricia said, but we also wanted Natalie to have as normal a life as possible. Desmond set down his fork. I understand why you kept it secret. After James died and then Sarah, everything was so complicated. But now we can do better, Emily finished. She turned to Natalie. If you want to, that is. We could start with school events. I promise not to be too embarrassing. Actually, Natalie glanced at Patricia, who nodded encouragingly. I have a solo in the spring concert next month. If you'd like to come. The tears that had been threatening all evening finally spilled down Emily's cheeks. We'd love to, all of us. As a family, Rowan added. Later, as we were clearing the dishes, Emily cornered me by the sink. I owe you an apology. Many apologies, actually. All those years I spent judging you, making comments about children. You didn't know. That's not an excuse. I was cruel because I was insecure, because I thought having children made me somehow better. But watching you with Natalie tonight, seeing how you've protected her all these years, you're more of a mother than I ever gave you credit for. Before I could respond, Natalie's laugh rang out from the living room, followed by Desmond's deeper chuckle. Through the doorway, I could see them looking at old photos, Patricia and Rowan adding commentary, while Mark recorded everything on his phone. She's going to want to spend more time here, I said. Are you ready for that? Emily dried her hands on a dish towel, her expression thoughtful. I'm ready to try, to be better, to be the kind of aunt, the kind of person she deserves. That's all any of us can do. From the living room, Natalie called out, Aunt Gwen, Uncle Desmond found pictures of Mom from high school. You have to see her hair. Emily and I exchanged a look, years of tension dissolving into something that felt almost like understanding. Together, we walked toward our family, not the one we'd pretended to be, but the one we were finally becoming. The spring concert arrived faster than any of us expected. I found Emily in the school parking lot, pacing nervously with a bouquet that could have stocked a small flower shop. Too much? She asked, gesturing at the flowers. Maybe a little, I admitted, but Natalie will love them. Patricia met us at the entrance, already holding seats. Front row, she announced proudly. Mark's setting up the video camera. Video camera? Emily's voice hitched. I only brought my phone. I didn't think. Don't worry, Rowan appeared behind us. Mark always makes copies for everyone. We settled into our seats. An odd collection of secret keepers turned family. Desmond, still moving carefully but looking much healthier, sat between Emily and me. Remember Sarah's first solo? He whispered. 8th grade talent show. She was so nervous she threw up backstage, I recalled, smiling at the memory. Natalie's stronger than that, Patricia said. You should see her in rehearsals. The lights dimmed, and the concert began. When Natalie stepped onto the stage in her blue dress, the one Emily had helped her pick out last weekend, I heard Emily's sharp intake of breath. She looks just like, I know, I whispered back. Natalie's voice filled the auditorium, clear and confident. She'd chosen Bridge Over Troubled Water, Sarah's favorite song. As she sang, I felt Emily's hand slip into mine, squeezing tightly. The applause was thunderous. Desmond wiped his eyes openly, while Mark struggled to keep the camera steady through his own tears. When Natalie took her bow, she looked directly at our row and beamed. After the concert, we gathered in the school lobby. Emily thrust her massive bouquet forward just as Patricia produced her more modest arrangement. Natalie laughed, trying to juggle both. You were amazing, sweetheart, Desmond said, hugging her carefully. Thanks, Uncle Des. She turned to Emily. Did you really cry? I saw you from stage. We all did, Rowan admitted. Your mother would have been so proud, Emily said softly. Then, to everyone's surprise, she turned to me. And she'd be proud of you too, Gwen. The way you've protected Natalie, guided her. We all did, I echoed Rowan's words. Patricia, Mark, all of us. No, Emily's voice cracked. I need to say this. I've spent years being horrible to you because I thought having children made me special somehow, made me better. But watching you with Natalie these past few months, seeing how you've always put her first, even when it meant enduring my awful comments, she wiped her eyes. I was wrong, so wrong. Aunt Emily, Natalie interrupted, you're smudging your makeup. The tension broke as everyone laughed. Even Emily managed a watery chuckle. How about ice cream? Mark suggested. I know a place that's open late. At the ice cream parlor, we pushed tables together to fit our unconventional family. Natalie sat between Emily and me, showing us videos on her phone of rehearsals, while Desmond and Rowan argued good-naturedly about whose turn it was to pay. I have something to ask, Natalie said suddenly, putting down her spoon. I've been talking with Patricia, and I'd like to spend more time with everyone. Maybe even stay over sometimes, if that's okay. Emily dropped her napkin. You mean it? We could set up the guest room, Desmond added quickly. Make it yours. Slow down, Patricia cautioned. Maybe we start with dinner twice a week. See how it goes? I watched Natalie's face light up at the suggestion. That sounds perfect. And maybe, Emily ventured carefully, we could come to your dance recitals too? All of them, not just the big ones? Even the boring ones where I'm just a backup dancer? Especially those, Desmond grinned. As they discussed schedules and arrangements, I felt Rowan's arm around my shoulders. You okay? He whispered. I looked at our family, really looked at them. Emily and Natalie planning future performances, Desmond showing Patricia old photos on his phone, Mark still fiddling with his camera. The walls we'd built to protect Natalie had come down, but instead of destruction, we'd found connection. Sarah would love this, I said softly. She does, Rowan replied. She's here, in all of us, especially in the way Natalie brings people together. Just like her mother, Emily overheard us, always building bridges. Speaking of building, Natalie piped up, does this mean I can finally put family photos on my Instagram? The question set off another round of laughter and discussion about social media boundaries. As I watched them talk, I realized that sometimes the strongest families aren't the ones you're born into, but the ones you build, even if it takes 13 years and a few medical emergencies to get there. The autumn breeze scattered leaves across Sarah's headstone as I placed fresh flowers beside it. Behind me, I heard the crunch of footsteps on fallen leaves. I thought I'd find you here, Emily said softly, holding her own bouquet. Natalie told me you always visit on Thursdays. It's our tradition, I replied, though usually it's just me and Patricia. Do you mind if I... She gestured to the grave. Of course not. She was your friend, too. Emily knelt beside me, arranging her flowers next to mine. I've never been here before. I couldn't, after everything that happened. But Natalie showed me Sarah's letters last night, and I realized how much I've missed. Sarah would have loved seeing Natalie perform at the Harvest Festival yesterday, I said, especially with you and Desmond cheering so loudly in the front row. We embarrassed her terribly, Emily laughed, then grew serious. I keep thinking about what Sarah wrote in those letters, about wanting Natalie to grow up free from family pressure. I was exactly what she was afraid of, wasn't I? Before I could respond, more footsteps approached. Natalie appeared, followed by Patricia, Rowan, Desmond, and Mark. Family meeting at the cemetery? Natalie asked, raising an eyebrow. More like a reunion, Mark said, producing a thermos. Hot chocolate, anyone? Your mother's recipe, Natalie. We settled on the blanket Mark spread out, passing the thermos around. Natalie sat between Emily and me, pulling out a worn envelope. I found another letter last night, she announced. It was dated just before. You know, Mom wrote about all of you. You don't have to share it, Patricia said gently. I want to. Natalie unfolded the paper carefully. Dear baby girl, I wish I could be there to see you grow up, but I know you'll be surrounded by love. Your Aunt Gwen will protect you fiercely. Patricia will give you a normal life. Mark will make you laugh. Rowan will be your rock. She paused, glancing at Emily and Desmond. And your Uncle Desmond and Aunt Emily? They'll learn that family isn't about perfect appearances or meeting expectations. It's about love, even when it's messy and complicated. Give them time. They'll figure it out eventually. Emily wiped her eyes. She knew us better than we knew ourselves. She always did, Desmond agreed. Remember when she predicted we'd end up together? We thought she was crazy. Stories began flowing then. Memories of Sarah, of shared childhoods, of mistakes made and lessons learned. Natalie soaked it all in, occasionally adding her own insights from the letters she'd grown up reading. I have something to tell you all, Emily said during a lull in the conversation. I've been seeing a therapist, working through my issues about family and control. I want to be better, for all of you, but especially for Natalie. That's brave, I said, meaning it. It's necessary, she replied. I don't want to be the aunt everyone dreads seeing at family gatherings anymore. Too late, Natalie teased. Now you're the aunt who brings embarrassingly large bouquets and cheers too loudly at school events. Much better, Desmond laughed, pulling Emily close. Mark raised the thermos. To Sarah, who somehow planned all this from beyond. To Mom, Natalie echoed. Who knew we'd figure it out eventually? As the others continued sharing stories, I traced Sarah's name on the headstone. The secret I'd carried for 13 years had transformed from a burden into a bridge, connecting us all in ways I never expected. Aunt Gwen? Natalie's voice pulled me back. Thank you for everything, for keeping me safe, for letting me choose when to know everyone, for giving me all these people who love me. Your mother knew what she was doing, I said. She knew love would win out eventually. Even over Emily's pride? Desmond teased, earning a playful swat from his wife. Especially over that, Emily admitted, though I maintain those bouquets aren't too big. They're bigger than Natalie, Patricia laughed. As the banter continued, I watched my family, not perfect, not conventional, but real and whole. The walls we'd built to protect Natalie had become foundations for something stronger, Sarah's final gift to us all. The autumn sun began to set, painting the cemetery in warm golds and reds. None of us moved to leave. We had all the time in the world now, and so many stories left to share.
The text message glowed on my phone screen like a bad omen. Tabitha, we need to talk. The family business is in trouble. My brother Riley's number, one I hadn't seen in 8 years. I'm Tabitha. And the last time I saw my family, I was being thrown out of our mansion for choosing love over legacy. The memory still burns fresh. My father's face turning purple with rage, my mother's ice-cold stare, and my brothers standing like statues in the background while I packed my bags. Everything okay? Alex's voice pulled me from the memory. He was wiping grease from his hands with a shop rag, his coveralls bearing our company logo. Wagner Auto Care, women-led, customer first. Riley just texted, I said, showing him the phone. Apparently, the mighty Taylor empire is crumbling. Alex's eyebrows shot up. After 8 years of radio silence? Karma's a funny thing, isn't it? I set my phone face down on my desk, trying to focus on the stack of invoices before me, but my hands were shaking. Want to talk about it? Alex pulled up a chair, his presence as steady and reassuring as it had been that night I chose him over my inheritance. "Remember when my father called you grease monkey trash?" I laughed, but it came out hollow. "Now look at us. 20 locations across the state and every single one profitable. Thanks to you." Alex squeezed my hand. "You turned one rundown garage into something amazing." The door burst open, and Amelia, my business partner, strode in waving a tablet. "Have you seen the news? Taylor Industries is facing federal investigation for fraud. It's all over the financial sites." My stomach dropped. I grabbed my phone and started Googling. Headlines screamed about suspicious accounting practices, insider trading allegations, and potential bankruptcy. Photos showed my father leaving the federal building, looking older and smaller than I remembered. "Holy shit," I whispered. "Your father's company?" Sophia, our head mechanic, appeared in the doorway. "The one who said women don't belong in the automotive industry?" I nodded, remembering his words when I first mentioned learning about cars. "That's beneath us, Tabitha. Know your place." "Well," Sophia crossed her arms. "Looks like he should have listened to his daughter after all." My phone buzzed again. This time it was Nicholas, my older brother. "Mom and Dad are asking for you. Please call." "What are you thinking?" Alex asked softly. I stood up, pacing the office. 8 years ago, I begged them to accept you, to see that I could make my own choices. Mom said I was throwing away everything they'd built for me. Dad said I was dead to them. My voice cracked. "Now they need me?" Amelia perched on my desk. "Whatever you decide, we've got your back." "Remember that night?" I turned to Alex. "When I showed up at your apartment with 2 suitcases and tears streaming down my face?" He smiled. "You said, 'I choose you and I don't regret it.'" I still don't. I touched the simple wedding band on my finger. We built this from nothing. No family connections, no inherited wealth. Just hard work and believing in ourselves. Sophia snorted. "And proving every man wrong who said women can't run auto shops." My phone kept buzzing. More messages from Riley, Nicholas, even one from my mother. Each one more desperate than the last. You know what's funny? I picked up a framed photo from my desk, our first shop's grand opening. They thought I was throwing my life away, but I've never felt more alive than when I'm here, proving them wrong every single day. "So what's the plan, boss?" Amelia asked. I took a deep breath, straightening my shoulders. "They want to talk?" "Fine, but this time it's on my terms." I started typing a response to Riley. "Meet me at Wagner Auto Care tomorrow, 9 a.m. sharp. Bring them all. You sure about this?" Alex's concern was evident. I looked around my office at the awards on the wall, the photos of our growing business, the faces of the women we'd trained and employed. They took everything from me once, thinking I'd come crawling back. Instead, I built something better. I smiled, feeling stronger than I had in years. Now they're the ones crawling back. Want me to accidentally spill some oil on their fancy shoes? Sophia grinned wickedly. We all laughed, breaking the tension. But as my team filed out, leaving me alone with Alex, I felt the weight of tomorrow settling on my shoulders. "Whatever happens," Alex said, pulling me into a hug. "Remember that choosing love wasn't your weakness. It was your strength." I nodded against his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of motor oil and coffee. Tomorrow I'd face my past. But this time, I wasn't the powerless daughter they'd cast aside. I was Tabitha Wagner, and I'd built an empire of my own, one that actually made a difference in people's lives. My phone buzzed one final time. Riley again. "We'll be there. Thank you, Tabs." I turned off my phone and took Alex's hand. "Let's go home. Tomorrow's going to be interesting." They arrived in a Mercedes, still clinging to appearances despite everything. I watched through my office window as they stepped out, looking like poorly cast versions of their former selves. My father's suit hung loose on his frame, my mother's designer heels scuffed at the edges. Riley and Nicholas followed, both wearing the haunted expressions of men who hadn't slept in weeks. "Ready?" Alex squeezed my shoulder, as I'll ever be. I straightened my Wagner Auto Care polo shirt, worn deliberately instead of my usual business attire. Amelia met them at the entrance. I heard her voice carrying through the hallway. Please wait in the conference room. Tabitha will be with you shortly. I gave them 10 minutes. Let them sit there, surrounded by photos of our successful business launches, awards, and newspaper features about our women's mentorship program. When I finally walked in, my mother gasped. Maybe she expected to see the polished debutante they'd raised. Instead, she got me. Confident, successful, and completely independent of their world. Tabitha. My father stood, extending his hand. You look, well, I didn't take it. Let's skip the pleasantries. You're here because you need something. Always direct. Nicholas muttered. Some things never change. The business is failing. Riley cut in, ever the practical one. We're facing criminal charges, frozen assets, and... I've seen the news, I interrupted, sitting at the head of the table. What I don't understand is why you're here. My mother's perfectly manicured hands trembled as she clutched her designer purse. We need help, darling. Your father's reputation. My father's reputation? I laughed. The same reputation he used to justify disowning me? We made mistakes. My father's voice cracked. Terrible mistakes. With you, with the business. Save it. I held up my hand. What exactly do you want from me? They exchanged glances before Riley spoke. Your business is thriving. We need employment, references, something to show the courts we're making amends. You want jobs? I leaned forward. Here? It's beneath us, my mother blurted, then quickly covered her mouth. Kendall, my father snapped. No, let her finish, I said coldly. What exactly is beneath you, Mother? Honest work? Or working for your daughter? Silence filled the room. Through the conference room windows, I could see Sophia teaching a young female apprentice how to diagnose an engine problem. The pride on both their faces said everything about what we'd built here. We're desperate, Nicholas admitted. Everything's gone. The houses, the cars, the connections. Nobody will touch us. Karma's fascinating, isn't it? I stood walking to the window. 8 years ago, you told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life. That marrying a mechanic would lead to nothing but poverty and regret. We were wrong, Riley said softly. Look at what you've built. I turned back to them. You want jobs? Fine. But here's my condition. You start at the bottom, all of you. What do you mean? My father's face reddened. Dad, you'll work in customer service. Mom, you'll be a receptionist. Nicholas and Riley, you'll train as entry-level mechanics under Sophia. This is absurd. My mother stood up. We're not some common. Take it or leave it. I cut her off. You'll earn minimum wage, follow all company policies, and most importantly, you'll report to women in leadership positions. You're enjoying this? Nicholas accused. No. I met his gaze. I'm offering you what you never gave me. A chance to prove yourselves through hard work rather than privilege. My father stood slowly, his shoulders sagging. When do we start? Robert. My mother grabbed his arm. You can't be serious. We don't have a choice, Kendall, he said quietly. Our accounts are frozen. The lawyers need to be paid. We need income. Any income. I pulled out 4 employee handbooks from my briefcase. Monday morning, 8 a.m. sharp. Dress code is in the handbook. And just so we're clear, 1 hint of undermining my business, 1 complaint about taking orders from women, and you're out. Riley took the handbooks, distributing them silently. One more thing, I added as they stood to leave. The name Taylor doesn't exist here. You're Robert, Kendall, Nicholas, and Riley. Nothing more. My mother's eyes filled with tears as she clutched her handbook. Is this revenge, Tabitha? No, Mother. This is opportunity. The same kind you denied me. The difference is, I'm actually giving you a choice. They filed out slowly, defeated but desperate enough to accept my terms. As the door closed behind them, Alex and Amelia slipped in. That was intense. Amelia whistled low. You okay? Alex asked, wrapping an arm around my waist. I watched through the window as my family climbed back into their Mercedes, probably one of the last remnants of their former life. You know what's strange? I leaned into Alex's embrace. I thought seeing them brought low would feel better. But all I feel is empty. I turned to Amelia. Keep an eye on them when they start. Something tells me this isn't over. You think they're planning something? She asked. I remembered the calculating look in my father's eyes as he accepted my terms. I think they're desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. Their first week was exactly the train wreck I expected. I watched from my office as my father fumbled through customer interactions, his face reddening each time he had to say, "Let me check with my supervisor." My mother's perfectly manicured nails clicked against the keyboard as she struggled with our scheduling software, each mistake making her jump when Sophia barked corrections from across the shop. But it was the scene unfolding in the garage that drew my attention now. That's not how you hold a wrench. Sophia's voice carried through the open bay doors. Nicholas stood beside a lifted Honda, his once immaculate suit replaced by navy coveralls, looking utterly lost. I know what I'm doing, he snapped, then immediately dropped the wrench on his foot. Sophia crossed her arms. Really? Because from where I'm standing, you look like a toddler playing mechanic. I stepped closer, pretending to review paperwork while eavesdropping. This is ridiculous, Nicholas muttered. I have an MBA from... Your MBA won't fix this timing belt. Sophia cut him off. Now, watch carefully. This is the third time I'm showing you. Riley, surprisingly, was doing better. He actually seemed interested in learning, asking questions and taking notes. It reminded me of when we were kids, before our parents' expectations crushed his natural curiosity. Quite a sight, isn't it? Amelia appeared beside me, coffee in hand. Like watching aliens try to blend in with humans, I agreed. A crash from the front office interrupted us. My mother had knocked over a display of air fresheners, and instead of picking them up, she was having what looked like a full meltdown. I can't do this anymore, she cried, mascara running down her cheeks. I used to run charity galas, for God's sake. I started toward her, but Riley got there first. Mom, come on, let's get some air. He led her outside, and something in their body language made me follow at a distance. They didn't notice me standing just around the corner of the building. I know it's hard, Riley was saying, but we don't have a choice. Your father's pride will be the death of me, my mother sobbed. First the illegal trading, then the covered-up losses, and now this humiliation. I froze. Illegal trading? Covered-up losses? Mom, keep your voice down, Riley hissed. Nobody can know about that. Why not? Everyone knows everything else. Our friends, our colleagues, they're all laughing at us. And now my own daughter has turned me into a common receptionist. Better than prison, Riley muttered. My mother's voice turned sharp. What did you say? Nothing. Riley sighed. Let's get back inside before... Before what? I stepped around the corner, making them both jump. Before I hear something I'm not supposed to? My mother straightened, quickly wiping her eyes. Tabitha, Save it. I held up my hand. Riley, what did you mean about prison? He looked away. It's complicated. Uncomplicate it. Tabitha. My father's voice boomed from behind me. He'd followed us out. This is none of your concern. It became my concern when you showed up begging for jobs. I turned to face him. What exactly are you hiding? Robert, my mother warned, but he was already advancing toward me, finger pointed. You think you can interrogate us just because we're working in your little garage? You're still my daughter, and you will show some respect. I didn't back down. Respect? Like the respect you showed me when you threw me out? Or the respect you're showing now by hiding whatever illegal mess you've created? You have no idea what pressures I was under, he shouted. The market was crashing, investors were pulling out. Dad, stop. Riley grabbed his arm, but the damage was done. I saw it in their faces. There was way more to their downfall than what had made the news. "Get back to work," I said coldly. "All of you. But this conversation isn't over." As they filed back inside, Amelia appeared at my side. "I recorded everything," she whispered, showing me her phone. "Been keeping an eye on them since they started acting sketchy yesterday." "Send it to my email," I replied quietly. "And call Marcus." "Your lawyer? You think it's that serious?" I watched through the window as my family resumed their positions. My father with his forced smile at customers, my mother's shaking hands at the computer, my brothers under Sophia's stern supervision. "They're hiding something big," I said. "Something that could explain why they're really here." "You think they're trying to use your business as cover?" "I don't know." I pulled out my phone, already drafting an email to Marcus. "But I'm going to find out. In the meantime, watch them like a hawk. Record everything suspicious." "What about Sophia? Should we tell her?" I thought about my head mechanic's sharp eyes and sharper tongue. "No. Let her keep teaching them. The more they struggle with honest work, the more likely they are to slip up and reveal what they're hiding." And if they do? I watched my father fumble another customer interaction, his facade of humility cracking just slightly. "Then they'll learn what real consequences feel like." "We need to talk." Riley cornered me in the supply room after hours, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not here. Not with them around." I checked my watch. Everyone else had left except Alex, who was finishing paperwork in our office. "Fine. 5 minutes." We walked to the small courtyard behind the shop. The setting sun cast long shadows across the concrete, and the air still smelled of motor oil and rubber. "Dad's been making phone calls during his breaks," Riley said, pacing, "to someone named Marcus." My stomach dropped. "Marcus, my lawyer. How do you know?" "I overheard him yesterday. He was asking about business registration documents, ownership structures." Riley ran a hand through his hair. "Tabs, I think he's trying to find a way to take control of your business." "He can't," I said firmly, but my hands were shaking. "The business is ironclad. Alex and I made sure—" "Dad always finds a way," Riley interrupted. "Just like he found ways to cook the books at Taylor Industries, to hide losses, to—" He trailed off. "To what, Riley?" He pulled out his phone, showed me a series of emails. "These are from 6 months ago. Dad was desperate. The company was hemorrhaging money, so he started moving funds between accounts. Client money, investment funds, even Mom's trust fund." Jesus Christ. I scrolled through the emails, each one more damning than the last. "Why are you showing me this? Because I can't take it anymore." Riley's voice cracked. "The lying, the scheming. Do you know what it was like watching him destroy everything? Watching him drag Nicholas into it?" "Nicholas knows?" "Nicholas helped." Riley laughed bitterly. "Good old Nicholas, always trying to be just like Dad." A noise from inside the shop made us both jump. Alex appeared in the doorway. "Everything okay out here?" I quickly handed Riley's phone back. "Just catching up." Alex's eyes narrowed. He knew me too well to buy that. "Your father's still here. Saw him making calls in his car." Riley tensed. "I should go." "Wait." I grabbed his arm. "Why now? Why tell me this?" He looked at me, and for a moment I saw the brother I used to know. The one who'd sneak me candy when I was sad, who taught me to ride a bike when Dad was too busy. "Because you got out," he said softly. "You chose love over money, and look what you built. Meanwhile, I chose money over everything, and all it got me was—" He gestured to his grease-stained coveralls. "Riley." Our father's voice boomed from inside. "Where are you?" "Don't tell him what I showed you," Riley whispered urgently. "He'll—" "There you are." Our father appeared in the doorway, his fake customer service smile dropping instantly. "What's going on here?" "Just smoking," Riley lied smoothly, pulling out a cigarette pack. "With your sister?" Dad's eyes darted between us suspiciously. "Is that a problem?" I challenged. Of course not. His smile returned, false as ever. But it's late. We should go, Riley. As they left, Alex wrapped an arm around my waist. Want to tell me what that was really about? I waited until I heard their car start up and drive away. Pull up the security cameras from today. Focus on my father's brakes. I need to see who he's been calling. 20 minutes later, we had our answer. The footage clearly showed him accessing the business's Wi-Fi, looking up legal documents on his phone. He's planning something, Alex said, rewinding the footage again. No, I corrected. He's already planned it. This is just him setting it in motion. I pulled out my own phone, dialed Marcus. Tabitha? My lawyer answered on the first ring. I was just about to call you. Your father reached out to my office today. What did he want? Information about your business structure. Said he was your father and had investing interests. I gripped the phone tighter. And I told him to go through proper channels. But Tabitha, he mentioned something about original funding sources. Said he had proof of family money being used for initial startup. That's a lie. Alex cut in, loud enough for Marcus to hear. We built this from scratch. My savings, Tabitha's side jobs. I know, Marcus replied. But he's building a case. And given his background in corporate law, he's trying to claim ownership. I finished. Or at least enough of a stake to gain control. Exactly. And Tabitha? He's not working alone. I've had calls from 3 other lawyers today, all asking similar questions. I thought of Nicholas, of my mother's tears, of Riley's warnings. How do we stop this? Keep everything documented. Every interaction, every conversation. And Tabitha? Be careful. Men like your father, when they're desperate. I know. I ended the call, turned to Alex. We need to call an emergency meeting. Amelia, Sophia, everyone. First thing tomorrow. What are you thinking? I looked at the security footage still playing on the screen, at my father's familiar scheming expression. I'm thinking it's time to remind them who they're dealing with. They want to play dirty? Fine. But this time I'm ready for them. The early morning meeting was tense. I'd gathered everyone in the conference room before my family was due to arrive, laying out what we'd discovered. That sneaky bastard, Sophia growled, cracking her knuckles. Want me to accidentally drop a transmission on his foot? No violence, I said, though the idea was tempting. We need to be smarter than that. Amelia spread printouts across the table, security footage stills, email records, phone logs. Your father's been accessing our network, sending documents to external emails. Can we fire them? One of our junior mechanics asked. I mean, this has to violate employment terms. Not yet, I replied. We need more evidence, something concrete that proves... The door burst open. My mother stood there, mascara streaked down her face. Tabitha, please, I need to talk to you. I nodded to the others. Give us a minute. As they filed out, my mother collapsed into a chair, her designer purse hitting the floor. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending. Pretending what? That this is about jobs, about redemption. She pulled out a handkerchief, dabbed at her eyes. Your father, he's planning to take everything from you, just like he took everything from me. I sat down slowly. What do you mean? Before I married him, I had dreams. I was going to open my own fashion house. I had designs, connections, even investors lined up. She laughed bitterly. But your father convinced me to invest it all in his company instead. Said it was safer, smarter. And you did it? I was young and in love. She met my eyes. Just like you were with Alex. The difference is you stood your ground. I gave in. Why are you telling me this now? Because history's repeating itself. She reached into her purse, pulled out a USB drive. Everything's here. The fraud, the embezzlement, the real reason we lost everything. Your father didn't just make bad investments. He stole from his own clients. I stared at the drive. And Nicholas helped him. Nicholas worshipped him. Still does. She pushed the drive across the table. Riley tried to stop it, threatened to go to the authorities. That's when your father promoted him, gave him a bigger stake, bought his silence. And you? Where were you in all this? Hosting charity galas, she said bitterly, playing the perfect wife while my dreams collected dust in a storage unit. She stood up suddenly. I should go, if your father knows I gave you this. Mom, wait. I grabbed her hand. Why now? Why help me? She squeezed my hand, and for the first time in years, I saw real emotion in her eyes. Because watching you build this place, seeing how you inspire these women, it reminded me of who I used to be, before I let your father crush my spirit. The front door chimed. The others were arriving for work. Don't tell them I was here, my mother whispered, heading for the back exit. And Tabitha? Be careful. Your father's desperate, and desperate men are dangerous, I finished. I know. After she left, I plugged the USB drive into my laptop. Files upon files appeared. Financial records, emails, voice recordings. Everything we needed to prove what they'd done. Alex found me still staring at the screen 20 minutes later. Hey, your family's here, and what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. I showed him what I'd found. His face darkened as he read. This is bigger than trying to steal your business, he said finally. This is criminal. I know. I closed the laptop. Get Amelia and Sophia. Tell them to watch my father and Nicholas carefully today. Record everything. What about your mom and Riley? I thought about my mother's tears, Riley's warnings. They might be our allies in this, but first, I pulled out my phone, dialed Marcus again. Tabitha, it's early. How quickly can you get here? I have something you need to see. Give me an hour. I ended the call, stood up, straightened my shirt. Through the window, I could see my father and Nicholas arriving, heads together, probably plotting their next move. What are you going to do? Alex asked. First, I'm going to act normal. Let them think their plan is working. I smiled grimly. Then, when Marcus gets here, we're going to show them exactly what happens when you try to steal from me. And your mom? Riley? I touched the USB drive in my pocket. They made their choice. Now it's time to make mine. Walking out into the shop, I passed my mother at the reception desk. Our eyes met briefly, and she gave me the smallest of nods. Good morning, everyone, I called out, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside. Let's get to work. My father smiled his fake smile, but I saw the predator behind it. That was fine. He thought I was still his little girl, easy to manipulate and control. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. Marcus arrived with 2 federal agents, their presence immediately shifting the atmosphere in the shop. I watched through my office window as my father's face drained of color when they walked in. What's the meaning of this? He demanded, abandoning his customer service post. Robert. Marcus nodded coolly. Perhaps we should take this conversation somewhere private. I led them to the conference room where Amelia had already set up a laptop displaying the evidence. My mother and Riley slipped in behind us, while Nicholas stood frozen in the doorway, still holding a wrench. Come in, Nicholas, I said. You'll want to hear this too. The federal agents introduced themselves, Weber and Rodriguez from the Financial Crimes Unit. They'd apparently been building a case against Taylor Industries for months. We have some questions about certain financial transactions. Agent Weber began, laying out documents that looked eerily similar to what my mother had provided. I don't have to answer anything without my lawyer, my father blustered, but his hands were shaking. Actually, Marcus interjected, given that you've been attempting to fraudulently claim ownership of this business, I think you'll want to cooperate. Nicholas stepped forward. Whatever you think you know, we know everything. I cut in, turning the laptop around. The embezzlement, the client fraud, how you used Mom's trust fund to cover your tracks. My father's face turned purple. You! He whirled on my mother. You did this. No, Robert. She stood straighter, her voice steady. You did this. All of it. I just finally stopped covering for you. Mrs. Taylor has already provided a full statement, Agent Rodriguez said, making notes. As has your son, Riley. Nicholas staggered back. Riley, you betrayed us? I chose truth over family loyalty. Riley met his brother's eyes. Something I should have done years ago. My father lunged for the laptop, but Agent Weber caught his arm. Sir, please don't make this worse for yourself. Worse? He laughed manically. My own daughter, my wife, my son, all conspiring against me. How could it be worse? You could go to prison for 20 years instead of 5, Agent Rodriguez said calmly. Cooperation tends to look good to judges. I watched my father deflate, decades of arrogance crumbling in minutes. Nicholas sank into a chair, head in his hands. What happens now? My mother asked quietly. Now. Agent Weber pulled out handcuffs. Robert and Nicholas will come with us to answer some questions. The rest of you should expect to be called as witnesses. As they led my father and brother out, customers and employees stared. Sophia appeared at my side, arms crossed. Want me to handle damage control? I nodded, grateful for her support. Tell everyone we'll have a full staff meeting tomorrow morning. Once the federal agents left, Riley turned to me. I'm sorry, Tabs. For everything. For not standing up to him sooner. You did it now, I said. That counts for something. My mother touched my arm hesitantly. What about us? Our jobs here? I looked at Alex and Amelia, who both nodded slightly. You can stay, both of you. But things will be different now. Different how? Riley asked. No more lies, no more schemes. You'll work honest jobs, learn real skills, and maybe... I took a deep breath. Maybe we can start rebuilding something real this time. I'd like that, my mother whispered. And Tabitha? That storage unit I mentioned? With my old designs? It's still there. I've kept paying for it all these years. Maybe it's time to dust them off, I suggested. We could use a proper uniform supplier for the shops. Her eyes lit up for the first time in years. After they left to process everything, Alex pulled me into his arms. You okay? No, I admitted. But I will be. I looked around our shop. The business we'd built from nothing. The dream we'd fought for. You know what's funny? All those years I thought they were so powerful, so untouchable. And now I see they were just scared people making desperate choices. I pulled out my phone, showing him a text from Agent Weber. Your father's already talking. Looks like a plea deal in the works. Think they'll actually change? Alex asked. Mom and Riley? Maybe. They seem genuinely ready to try. I watched through the window as they walked to their car. No more Mercedes, just a used Honda Riley had bought with his first real paycheck from us. And you? Are you ready to try with them? I thought about my mother's hidden dreams, Riley's quiet resistance, how they'd both finally chosen truth over facade. Yeah, I said slowly. I think I am. Not for who they were, but for who they might become. Sophia poked her head in. Boss? Customers are asking questions about the police. Tell them the truth, I decided. That we discovered fraud and reported it. That we believe in doing the right thing, even when it's hard. She grinned. Now that's the kind of leadership speech I like. As she left, Alex squeezed my hand. Proud of you, you know that? I squeezed back, watching our employees return to work, our business continuing despite the morning's drama. I'm proud of us, all of us. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters when we arrived for the sentencing. 3 months had passed since that morning in the shop, and everything had changed. Ms. Wagner. They thrust microphones toward me. How does it feel to be the whistleblower in your own family's scandal? I pushed through with Alex at my side, Riley and my mother following close behind. Inside, the marble halls echoed with whispers and footsteps. Ready for this? Alex squeezed my hand. Before I could answer, Nicholas appeared with his lawyer. He'd lost weight in custody, his designer suit replaced by department store clearance. Our eyes met briefly before he looked away. Tabitha. His voice was barely audible, Can we talk, please? Riley stepped forward protectively, but I nodded. 5 minutes. We moved to a quiet corner while the others took their seats in the courtroom. Dad took a plea deal, Nicholas said, running a hand through his unkempt hair. 15 years, eligible for parole in 8. I know, the prosecutors told me. He wanted me to take one too. Nicholas laughed bitterly. Said it would look better if we both showed remorse. And I told him no. He met my eyes. I'm pleading guilty, but I'm telling everything. Every scheme, every lie, every client we betrayed. No deals. I studied his face, searching for the brother I once knew. Why? Because you were right. His voice cracked. About everything. The way Dad raised us, the values he taught us, it was all poison. I see that now. The bailiff called for everyone to enter the courtroom. Nicholas? I caught his arm. How long are you looking at? With full cooperation? 5 to 7 years. He attempted a smile. Plenty of time to think about who I want to be when I get out. Inside, my father sat at the defendant's table, shoulders slumped. He didn't look at any of us as we filed into our seats. The judge entered and the proceedings began. I half listened as lawyers presented final statements, as my father made a tearful plea for leniency that sounded as fake as his customer service smile. Then it was my turn to speak. Ms. Wagner, the judge nodded. As both victim and whistleblower, you have the right to make a statement. I stood, feeling every eye in the courtroom. 8 years ago, my father disowned me for choosing love over money. He said I was throwing my life away by marrying a mechanic and walking away from the family business. My father flinched. What I actually walked away from was a legacy of lies. While I built something real, a business that helps people, that creates opportunities, that values honesty, he was destroying lives with fraud and theft. I turned to face him directly. You taught us that image was everything. That success meant having the biggest house, the most expensive car, the right connections. But sitting here today, I'm successful because I rejected everything you stood for. The judge leaned forward. And what would you like to see happen here today? Justice, I said simply. Not revenge, not punishment, but real justice. For the clients who lost their savings, for the employees who lost their jobs, and for the family members who lost their way trying to please you. After I sat down, my mother squeezed my hand, tears rolling down her cheeks. The sentencing was swift. 15 years for my father. Nicholas received 6 years with the possibility of early release for cooperation. As they led them away, my father finally looked at me. Tabitha, he called out. I'm sorry, for everything. I didn't respond. Some apologies come too late. Outside, the reporters were waiting again. But this time, I was ready. Ms. Wagner, will you make a statement? Yes. I stepped up to the microphones, Alex, Riley, and my mother flanking me. Today isn't about family drama or corporate scandal. It's about choosing right over wrong, truth over lies, and integrity over image. What's next for Wagner Auto Care? I smiled, glancing at my mother. We're expanding, adding a line of custom workwear designed specifically for women in trades, actually. Turns out my mother's forgotten dreams fit perfectly with our mission. And your brother's? One's paying for his mistakes. The other, I squeezed Riley's shoulder, is learning to be the man he always wanted to be. Later that evening, back at the shop, Sophia raised a coffee mug and toast. To justice served. To new beginnings, my mother added, spreading design sketches across the break room table. To family, Riley said quietly. The kind we choose to be. I looked around at these people. My husband, my reformed mother, my changed brother, my loyal employees. This was real success. Not the mansion I grew up in or the trust fund I lost, but this moment, this truth, this hard-won peace. To us, I said, raising my mug. All of us. And in that fluorescent-lit break room, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and coffee, I felt something I'd never felt in all my years in that massive family estate. I felt home. The bell above the shop door chimed as a young woman in a business suit walked in, clutching a newspaper. I recognized that lost look, that desperate hope in her eyes. "Can I help you?" I asked, setting down my coffee. "I read about you," she said, unfolding the article. "About standing up to your family, building your own business." She took a deep breath. "My father wants me to take over his law firm, but I want to open a bakery. Everyone says I'm crazy." Before I could respond, my mother emerged from her new design studio in the back. "You're not crazy," she said, smoothing her work apron. "You're brave." The woman blinked, recognizing her. You're Kendall from the article." "I am." My mother smiled. "And I spent 30 years regretting not following my dreams. Now I design workwear for women in trades, and every morning I wake up excited to come here." The door chimed again. Riley walked in with Sophia, both covered in grease from teaching a women's auto repair workshop. "Another successful class," Sophia announced. 3 of them already applied for apprenticeships. The young woman watched them, then turned back to me. "How did you do it? How did you find the courage? Come with me." I led her through the shop, past mechanics working on cars, past my mother's studio where prototype uniforms hung on racks. "See all this? It started with one choice. Choosing to be true to myself instead of living someone else's dream. But the cost was worth it," I finished. "Look around. We employ 50 people across 3 locations. My mother finally pursued her passion for design. My brother discovered he loves teaching mechanics. Even my father and Nicholas." I paused. "Well, they're learning hard lessons about what really matters." Alex appeared from under a lifted truck. "Babe," that supplier called. "They want to expand our partnership to the East Coast." The young woman's eyes widened. "You're expanding?" "We are." I turned to her. "What's your name?" "Sarah." "Well, Sarah, want to know the secret to success? It's not about having the most expensive degree or following the safe path. It's about building something real, something that matters." "Like fresh bread?" She smiled hesitantly. "Exactly like fresh bread." I grabbed a business card. "This is my lawyer, Marcus. He helped me set up my business legally, protected my interests. Call him." After Sarah left, clutching the card like a lifeline, Amelia joined us. "Reminds me of someone I know." "She's got that same fire," my mother agreed, pinning a new design to her board. Riley wiped his hands on a shop rag. "Speaking of fire," Nicholas wrote again. "He's taking business ethics classes in prison, wants to teach them when he gets out." "And Dad?" I asked quietly. "Still not accepting calls." Riley shrugged. "Some people never change. But we did," my mother said softly. "We're still changing." Sophia called out from the garage. "Boss, that reporter's here for the interview about women in automotive." "Coming." I turned to my family. The one I'd chosen. The one I'd rebuilt. Ready to show them what real success looks like? The interview went viral. Not because of our family drama, but because of what we'd built from its ashes. Women across the country started reaching out, asking about apprenticeships, about starting their own businesses. That evening, as we closed up shop, Sarah returned with a box of fresh pastries. "I quit my law internship," she announced, "and I brought samples of why." We gathered in the break room, mechanics, designers, family, passing around incredible croissants and danishes. "You know," Alex said, wrapping an arm around my waist, "the building next door is for rent. Would make a great bakery location." Sarah's eyes lit up. "Really?" "Really," I confirmed. "And we happen to know a great lawyer who can help with the paperwork." As everyone chatted and planned, I stepped back and watched. This was what winning looked like. Not destroying my father's empire, but building something better. Something that helped others find their courage, their voice, their path. My phone buzzed. A text from Nicholas. "Proud of you, sis. Keep changing lives." I typed back. "Keep changing yours." "Hey," Alex called. "Sarah wants to know if we'll help her renovate the space." I looked around at my unlikely family. Sophia teaching Riley the proper way to eat a croissant. My mother sketching designs for bakers' uniforms. Amelia already drawing up partnership possibilities. Of course we'll help, I said. That's what family does. And there it was. The real victory. Not in revenge or retribution, but in breaking cycles. In helping others break free too. In building something so strong, so true, that it rippled out beyond us, creating change we never imagined. To new beginnings. Sarah raised her coffee cup. No, I corrected gently. To being brave enough to make them happen. We all raised our cups, surrounded by the smell of fresh bread and motor oil, of dreams both old and new, of courage found and freedom earned. This was my empire, and it was built on love.